Chapter 1258. Death was so close to him. This wisp of willpower was integrated with his soul, state of mind, and body. It seemed to be able to be erased at will. But in the face of the great horror of life and death, it didn't waver at all. However, from this moment on, in the depths of the clouds, there was no more thunder, and even the sound of thunder was silent. Only the sky was full of lightning, silver, purple, and red, magnificent and gorgeous. Is it over? Lin's wisp of willpower was stunned. It was indeed over. The dark clouds began to disperse gradually, and the heaven's power that enveloped the world was receding at an amazing speed. The brilliant lightning all over the sky seemed to be attracted and shrouded Lin's wisp of willpower. Suddenly, the surging vitality emerged and turned into a bright halo. Lin's wisp of willpower was bathed in it and was transforming at an amazing speed. At this point, Lin Sun could believe that he had survived this unprecedented catastrophe. The lightning was like a light rain, bright and holy. Vaguely, Lin's body began to condense and regenerate. His soul also began to be reconstructed a quarter of an hour later. The lightning all over the sky dissipated, revealing a slender, dignified, and tall figure. Every inch of his body seemed to be carved out of flawless mutton fat jade. In his pores, there was dense Taoist light, flowing with wisps of faint brilliance, with a kind of restrained and holy aura. His thick black long hair, crystal clear, hung down to his waist, fluttering in the wind. Looking at his face, his black eyes were as deep as the abyss, and his facial features were angular. There was a trace of firmness and calmness in his handsome face. In his body, the Taoist seed took root like the root of heaven and earth. The surging spiritual power circulated in his body along a mysterious track, making a thunderous roar. In his sea of consciousness, 3 primordial spirit forms sat upright, solemn and dignified. Each of their heads was covered with a divine flower of the Great Way, sprinkling different hazy light rain. What was different from the past was that behind the 3 primordial spirit forms, there was a looming abyss as ethereal as the Great Way, giving people a heart-palpitating aura. Longevity Dharma form. Anyone who passed the tribulation of longevity and took root in the Taoist seed would condense a Dharma form in his soul. 3 tribulations of the longevity realm. While murmuring, Lin Sun suddenly raised his eyes, which were like a pair of sharp lightning, tearing the sky. On the other hand, Lin Sun's body emanated an extremely great and unparalleled might, and it caused the tribulation clouds in the sky that hadn't completely dispersed to be instantly crushed into powder. The surrounding void was wailing, as if it was submitting to him. He had been trapped for 4 years. Now that he had broken free, he had broken through the 3 tribulation of longevity and was reborn from death. He was like a fish leaping over the dragon gate and completely transforming into a dragon. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel excited, and he couldn't help letting out a long roar. His voice was like a dragon that resounded throughout the universe. When looked at from afar, the young man who stood towering in the sky was like a reborn god, and the peerless elegance he emanated caused the heavens and the earth to dim in comparison. Gu Fuzi, Yin Xingbai, all of you probably think that I'm dead. After a long time, Lin Sun restrained his aura and regained his transcendent temperament. His black eyes were calm as he looked into the distance. It's been 4 years. What has become of the upper 9 realms? Whoosh! Lin Sun took a step forward and disappeared into thin air. In the 5th year after the domain of despair descended on the ancient desolation, Lin Sun escaped from the bottom of the Styx River and returned to the world. In the depths of the dark forest, a group of strong figures appeared, led by a black-clothed young man with dashing eyebrows and starry eyes. He was Wang Xing, the future leader of the Huangting sword sect in the southern Xian world. Stop! Suddenly, the black-clothed young man waved his hand and said with a cold smile, I have something to say before we act. Everyone was awestruck. This time, our target is Zhao Jingxian, the future leader of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure. This woman has a close relationship with Lin Sun. She has never believed the news of Lin Sun's death, so she set up a hut here and waited for 4 years. Someone couldn't help but sneer. This woman is really chaste. She might as well live a happy life with me instead of being a widow for a dead man. The others all laughed. Wang Xing said leisurely, "Our task is to capture this woman alive and present her to His Highness. You also know that although Lin Sun is dead, His Highness' hatred cannot be quelled. Capturing this woman can also let His Highness vent his anger. However, I heard that this woman is an influential figure in the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure. If we do this, I'm afraid we will offend the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure." Someone said hesitantly. Wang Xing said disdainfully, "In the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure, only Yin Zhanxiu is feared. The others are nothing." Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. "That's easy. Brother Wang, let's act quickly. I can't wait any longer. This woman is Demon God Lin's confidant. After we capture her, if we can." A young man with long and narrow cheeks revealed an excited and lascivious smile. Demon God Lin, how glorious was he? Although he was already dead, if they could humiliate and play with his woman, that feeling, just thinking about it, made them excited. Seeing this, the others couldn't help but laugh again. Wang Xing frowned and scolded, "Be careful. This woman is to be offered to His Highness Underworld Child. If anyone dares to touch her, don't blame me for being rude. Sigh. If this woman really falls into His Highness Underworld Child's hands, I'm afraid she will be ravaged to death. You should know that Lin Sun was the one who ruined His Highness Underworld Child's plans. Even the smelting god pot was snatched away. How can His Highness Underworld Child not hate him? It's a pity that Lin Sun died 4 years ago." Someone sighed. "Cut the crap. Let's go," Wang Xing said coldly. He hated Lin Sun to the core. Back at the Three Life Rock, he originally wanted to cooperate with Lin Sun to deal with the powerhouses of the Greater One Taoism sect. Who would have thought that Lin Sun would directly reject him? In the end, in order to survive, he and his companions had no choice but to lower their heads and be humiliated by Lin Sun for extorting several divine herbs. In this operation, the reason why Wang Xing had targeted Zhao Jingxian was also because he wanted to take revenge. Although Lin Sun was dead, he could still take revenge on his woman, right? This was Wang Xing's mentality. Thinking of this, Wang Xing suddenly said, "Furthermore, even if he is alive, he is destined to be killed by His Highness Underworld Child." His words were full of resentment. The group moved forward. Not long after, a straw hut appeared in their sight. The straw hut was clean and tidy, with a herb garden and flower field in front of it. A figure of a woman was sitting under the eaves of the straw hut, lost in thought. "Zhao Jingxian?" Wang Xing took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. The woman did not answer. She just raised her head and looked over with a pair of clear eyes. Her eyes were empty and lonely. Wang Xing's heart trembled inexplicably. It was as if he was not facing a beautiful woman, but a body without a soul. "What are you looking at? Let me tell you. Come with us obediently, or today will be the day of your death." A young man scolded. "So beautiful." The young man with long and narrow cheeks revealed a lustful and infatuated look, and his eyes unscrupulously sized up Zhao Jingxian. At the thought that this was the woman of the famous Lin Sun, there was suddenly an indescribable excitement and tyranny in his heart. The woman turned a deaf ear to all this. She withdrew her eyes, lowered her head, and said, "I'm already a living dead. Why should I be afraid of life and death?" Her voice was dry and low, as if she had not spoken for a long time. "A living dead?" Wang Xing was stunned, and then her face darkened. She said, "Stop pretending to be mysterious. Let me tell you, even if you are a corpse, you must come with us this time." The others gasped. They did not expect that a person like Wang Xing would say such cruel words. Did she want to see Lin Sun alive or dead? Zhao Jingxian said no more. She had been waiting for 4 years, sitting here day and night. Her heart had already sunk into darkness. She was not stupid. She would not blindly believe that Lin Sun was still alive. But it didn't matter anymore. Over the past 4 years, she had been thinking about a question. Why did she choose to search and wait desperately when she learned of Lin Sun's death? Why didn't she want to believe that he had died? The answer had already been there the moment she decided to stay here and guard the place. But it was too late to understand. She regretted. She regretted that she didn't take this answer seriously a long time ago. The thatched cottage was quiet. The beautiful figure sitting under the eaves was also unusually quiet. From beginning to end, there was no panic, fear, or fear. It was as if, as she had said, they were merely living dead. So how could they fear life and death? But this was not what Wang Ziying wanted to see. In his mind, Zhao Jingxian should tremble and beg for mercy, or resist angrily and strongly. This was what he wanted to see. Only in this way could he have the pleasure of revenge. But now there was no such thing at all. This made Wang Ziying feel a kind of unspeakable annoyance and loss in his heart, but also an unspeakable anger. He waved his hand and shouted, "Go, take her down." The other strong men had been waiting impatiently. Hearing this, they rushed to the thatched cottage without hesitation. Boom! The fences surrounding the thatched cottage were smashed to pieces. The flower beds and medicinal fields that were blooming with all kinds of fresh flowers were also ruined to the point of devastation. The thatched cottage shook violently and finally collapsed. Originally, this place was quiet and secluded, but now everything was destroyed. Zhao Jingxian never wavered from beginning to end. In her hand, she held a treasure cauldron, which was branded with the pattern of 9 dragons flying. This was the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, which was refined by Lin Sun for her. Because of this treasure, she met him in Green Deer School for the first time. At that time, she disguised as a man. She was clean, elegant, high-spirited, and her clear eyes were as bright as stars. At that time, he was just a spiritual tattooist who had just been hired in Green Deer School, and he was still a little practitioner with low cultivation. At this time, he had been silent for 4 years, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. At this time, she was not afraid of death for 4 years. Chi! A strong wind came. It was the young man with long and narrow cheeks, with a kind of fanaticism, lust, and greed in his eyes. The attack was close at hand. Zhao Jingxian was still oblivious. She sat there like a beautiful statue. Chapter 1259. The beauty was right before his eyes. What was rare was that she seemed to have given up on resisting and was waiting for death to arrive. This caused the young man, with a narrow and long face, to be excited to the extreme. Just think about it. This was Devil God Lin's woman, and she was about to become his prey. All of you deserve death. But right at this moment, a voice that revealed bone-piercing coldness resounded out, and it seemed capable of freezing one's soul. At the same time, a strand of peerlessly copious killing intent rumbled and swept over like a tsunami, and it suffused the heavens and the earth. The space there was suddenly in disorder. The rocks and trees in the vicinity rumbled and transformed into powder. No matter if they were strong or weak, all the living beings that lay dormant in an area of 500 kilometers lay prostrate on the ground and shivered. The young man with a narrow and long face was shocked in his heart, while his entire body went cold, and he felt an unprecedented lethal threat. It seemed as if so long as he dared move in the slightest, he would suffer a calamity. But when he was less than a foot away from her, he was able to catch that beautiful prey. The strong unwillingness caused his eyes to turn red, and in the end, he gritted his teeth and decided to continue. Bang! But as soon as his arms stretched out, it rumbled and exploded into pieces, causing his flesh and blood to evaporate. The extreme intense pain caused him to let out a shrill cry that was like the howl of a wild beast, and his figure suddenly retreated explosively. Bang! But at the instant his figure retreated explosively, it was as if he'd suffered the crushing of a divine mountain, and his entire body exploded apart, while his flesh and blood sprayed into the surroundings. However, the strange thing was that not a single drop of the blood splattered onto that beautiful figure. Shit! It was also at this moment that Wang Xing and the others recovered from their shock. All of their expressions turned grim while their minds shook, and they didn't hesitate in the slightest to choose to retreat. Everything had occurred too quickly. It was swift to the point, even they weren't able to rescue him before the young man, with a narrow and long face, had already perished. Most terrifying of it all was that from the beginning until the end, they hadn't locked onto the tracks of the enemy. Rumble. This expanse of the heavens and the earth was dim, while space surged and fell into disorder, and peerless killing intent descended like a raging sea. In their daze, all of them felt as if they were in a hopeless situation in purgatory. It was also at this moment that they saw the enemy. It was a tall and handsome figure. His back was facing the crowd, and his gaze was fixed on the woman who was sitting there quietly like a beautiful statue. It was just a back view, but it gave Wang Xing and the others a suffocating pressure. It was as if the person standing there wasn't a person, but a demon god. This man was naturally Lin's son. As soon as he left the Nether River Forbidden Area, he was about to leave, but to his surprise, he sensed the fluctuations of battle. When he arrived, he immediately recognized Zhao Jingxian. When he noticed that she was besieged, Lin Sun felt as if his heart had been cut by a knife, producing an unspeakable anger. This was the outer area of the Nether River Forbidden Area. How could he not see that Zhao Jingxian had been waiting here for him for 4 years? This had exceeded his expectations, and it caused him to feel indescribably moved. His emotions surged like a tide and ceaselessly battered his mind. A person had built a hut here, waiting for his return. 4 years. Even if Lin Sun was an idiot, he knew how precious this friendship was. Because of this, when he saw Wang Xing and others attacking Zhao Jingxian, Lin Sun felt unprecedented anger. Fortunately, he came in time. It was possible to stop all this in time. If he came a little later, Lin Sun couldn't imagine the consequences. But at this time, when he saw Zhao Jingxian in front of him, Lin Sun was stunned. Jingxian. He opened his mouth, but the woman in front of him didn't realize it. She sat there in a quiet posture, motionless. She was like a clay statue. For a moment, Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank, and his heart twitched fiercely. He had a bad feeling. The woman's black hair was as black as ink, and her beautiful face was calm. Her eyes were fixed on the treasure tripod in her hands, and her expression was indescribably serene. But Lin Sun opened his eyes wide, as if he still couldn't believe it. Deep in his heart, there was an unspeakable emotion fermenting, which stimulated his hands to tremble unconsciously. What on earth happened? Lin, demon god Lin. Suddenly, a scream rang out. In the distance, Wang Xing and others finally recognized the identity of the person. They were so shocked that they couldn't believe their eyes. Wasn't this guy dead? Why could he still appear? No, this can't be true. For years ago, Lord Mingzi saw him fall into the Styx River with his own eyes. It's impossible for him to be alive. Wang Xing's face was gloomy, and he shouted, "Tell me, who are you? Why did you pretend to be Lin Sun, the dead man? It's you who killed Jing Xian." At this moment, Lin Sun turned around and looked at them. Wang Xing and others were stiff all over. At this moment, they saw Lin Sun's appearance clearly. It was so familiar that it couldn't be fake. Many people shivered all over, and their hair stood on end. A guy who had been confirmed dead for a long time appeared in front of them alive 4 years later. That kind of shock made them a little confused for a moment, and they couldn't accept it. How? How could it be possible? Don't panic, everyone. He can't be Lin Sun. Wang Xing took a deep breath and said, gritting his teeth, "Why did you do this?" Lin Sun's voice was low and hoarse, and his black eyes were terrifyingly cold. All the strong men who were swept by his eyes felt a chill in their hearts, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. If it wasn't Demon God Lin, who else could have such a terrifying aura? Ridiculous. Do you think you can scare us by pretending to be Demon God Lin? Everyone, let's attack together and kill this eyesore. Wang Xing shouted. Yes, this guy must be a fake. Kill. The other strong men were emboldened. They were afraid of Demon God Lin, not a fake. Boom. They attacked, and each of them displayed their real, unique skills. You deserve to die, Lin Sun murmured in a bone-chilling voice as he stepped out. Bang, bang, bang. As soon as those strong men rushed halfway, their bodies stopped there as if they were imprisoned. Then, they exploded one by one, and blood and dismembered bodies poured down, dyeing the void red. Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. He stepped forward, and his black eyes were like a deep abyss that seemed to be able to swallow people's souls. Only Wang Xing was left in the field. However, at this moment, he was completely dumbfounded. His mouth was wide open, and his whole body was trembling as if he was having a cramp. His face was blue and white. Among his companions, several had stepped into the dying king realm, and many of them had passed the longevity tribulation. Among their peers, they could be regarded as the elite force. But now they were all dead. From a beginning to the end, the man in front of him didn't do anything at all. He just took a step forward, and all his companions died tragically. This bloody scene made Wang Xing's mind go blank. How was this possible? He really couldn't think of anyone in the upper 9 realms who could do this. Don't come over. Lin Sun's figure was getting closer and closer, and Wang Xing suddenly woke up from his stupor. He retreated in panic as if he was frightened. However, his face was extremely pale, and he looked at Lin Sun as if he was looking at death from hell. Tell me the reason, and I can let you die quickly. Otherwise, I promise that you will spend the rest of your life begging for death. The low and hoarse voice was without a trace of emotion, but it made Wang Xing's knees weak and his mind on the verge of collapse. I'll tell you, Wang Xing had never imagined that when facing an opponent, she would actually be in such a sorry state, terrified and despairing state. He didn't even have the idea of resisting. Lin Sun stopped and stared at him indifferently. Wang Xing didn't hesitate to tell the whole story of capturing Zhao Jingxian alive and offering him to the son of hell. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly burst out with deep hatred, and he said, "It's already confirmed that I'm dead. Do you still want to retaliate against those close to me?" His voice was getting lower and lower. "Are you really Lin Sun? You're still alive." Wang Xing's eyes were wide open, and his pupils were bloodshot and almost burst. He couldn't believe it. Immediately, he gasped for breath and showed an expression that seemed to be crying and laughing at the same time. He said in a hoarse voice, "Haha, you're still alive. God is really blind to let you, the scourge, come back to life again." He seemed to be out of control, staring at Lin Sun with resentment. "But so what? Even if you're alive, you'll be killed by the son of hell. Well, Gu Fozi won't spare you either." Lin Sun was expressionless. "Look at you. You've been dead for 4 years, but you can't even protect your own woman. How sad it is. It's a pity that if you hadn't suddenly appeared, that woman would have been captured by us and suffered humiliation and torture." Wang Xing looked dejected again. He was indeed out of control, as if he had gone mad. Crack! The next moment, Wang Xing's neck was twisted. His face looked crazy and ferocious before he died. Lin Sun turned around and didn't look at him again. In the distance, the ground was full of scars. The collapsed fence, the messy herb garden, and the flower field had all withered. Even the thatched cottage had collapsed. It could be imagined that in the past 4 years, this place was like a quiet and secluded place. She had been waiting here silently and never changed her mind. She must be thinking that he couldn't be defeated like before. Naturally, it was impossible for her to die. Once again, he looked over at the beautiful figure who was sitting there quietly and had not moved at all from the beginning to the end. He saw the tranquil and affectionate look in her eyes when she gazed at the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons. He saw her beautiful face that had become thin unconsciously. Lin Sun only felt that his chest was blocked by a stone, and it became difficult for him to breathe. "Jingxian." He stepped forward and held her figure tightly in his arms. There was a kind of unspeakable emotion in his heart. Before entering the domain of absolute peak, he had gone to the holy land of spiritual treasure to invite Zhao Jingxian to act with him. But he was a step late. Later, he looked forward to meeting her again in the domain of absolute peak. But who would have thought that the first meeting after so many years would be like this? "You'll be fine." Absolutely not. No one can let you leave me unless I agree. Lin Sun held Zhao Jingxuan's warm and soft body in his arms and took several deep breaths to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. Then, he concentrated all his thoughts on Zhao Jingxian to sense and investigate her. P.S. There's no more for tonight. I've just calculated that Goldfish owes 7 chapters, which will be made up one by one in the future. Chapter 1260. In Zhao Jingxuan's sea of consciousness, wisps of purple mist lingered like divine chains, completely sealing her soul. The purple mist was extremely obscure, and when it rolled, it reflected dense Taoist patterns. No matter how hard Lin tried, he couldn't see through the mystery of the purple mist. He only knew that if he cracked it by force, it was very likely that Zhao Jingxian would never wake up again. Master, this is the power of the 6 god sealing seals, which is said to be unsolvable. Even sages can't crack it. Only the soul of the caster can wake up after going through the 6 reincarnations. Suddenly, Little Silver opened his mouth and saw through the mystery of the purple mist. Lin Sun was stunned, and then his expression became extremely complicated. Unsolvable? How long would he have to wait? Master, is she the mistress? Little Silver asked. Lin Sun was silent and didn't answer. When Zhao Jingxian woke up, he would give himself and her a clear answer. Holding his beloved in his arms tightly, Lin Sun's originally manic and tumbling emotions gradually calmed down. He couldn't help recalling the scenes of the past. At the edge of this forest, Yin Zhanxiu came again. He was dressed in white, and his appearance was handsome. He had the bearing of a phoenix, and his bearing was extraordinary. Behind him were a group of descendants of the holy land of spirit treasure. There were men and women, and all of them had powerful auras and extraordinary momentum. Among them, there were several extremely powerful supreme kings. However, there was a hint of hesitation between Yin Zhanxiu's eyebrows at this moment. When he was young, he had cultivated with Zhao Jingxian in the holy land of spirit treasure, and he had always been by her side with love. How could Yin Zhanxiu not be angry when he saw the woman he liked spend years waiting for a dead man? No hate. What annoyed him most was that Zhao Jingxian knew his feelings, but she had always been indifferent to him. Who could understand this feeling? Yin Zhanxiu's identity, status, cultivation, and talent were all top-notch in this generation. It was no exaggeration to say that as long as he wanted, there would be countless beauties throwing themselves into his arms with a wave of his hand. But Zhao Jingxian didn't care. Well, I'd rather offend junior sister Jingxian and take her away this time. Lin Sun is dead. She can't waste her youth like this anymore. Suddenly, Yin Zhanxiu took a deep breath and made a decision. Without any hesitation, he headed toward Zhao Jingxuan's secluded residence. Not long after, Yin Zhanxiu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Strands of piercingly cold, killing intent that hadn't dispersed still remained in the nearby 500 kilometers, and this caused his heart to constrict while his expression changed slightly. Is someone trying to harm junior sister Jingxian? Killing intent surged in Yin Zhanxiu's heart as he quickened his pace. Soon, he arrived at the place where Zhao Jingxian lived in seclusion. However, this place had changed completely. The grass hut had collapsed, and the ground was soaked in dark red blood. The air was still filled with the smell of blood. Before this, there must have been an extremely intense battle erupting here. After that, Yin Zhanxiu saw Lin Sun with a single glance. At this instant, his pupils constricted, and his heart skipped a beat. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. A dead person. How could he come back to life? Even with Yin Zhanxiu's composure, he almost cried out involuntarily. However, when he saw the beautiful figure in Lin Sun's arms, Yin Zhanxiu couldn't control himself anymore. Junior sister Jingxian. Yin Zhanxiu's eyes turned red with anger. The successors of the numinous treasure Holy Land behind him were also stunned as they looked at the scene before them in disbelief. Demon God Lin was still alive. For years ago, news of Lin Sun's death spread like a hurricane in the Upper Nine Realms, causing a huge uproar. including the successors of the numinous treasure Holy Land. They found it hard to believe and were shocked at the beginning. After all, regardless of whether they were friend or foe, they couldn't deny that Lin Sun was definitely a legendary and tyrannical figure. Who wouldn't pay attention to him dying just like that? However, after confirming the news of Lin Sun's death, the successors of the numinous treasure Holy Land felt a sense of schadenfreude. They secretly praised the heavens for having eyes. The reason was very simple. In the ancient Desolation realm, demon god Lin had once wreaked havoc in the numinous treasure Holy Land and killed many of their fellow disciples. How could they not be happy to see their enemy in trouble? But no matter how hard they racked their brains, they didn't expect that 4 years later, a dead person whom they had almost forgotten would actually appear in front of them alive. This was no different from seeing a living ghost. Lin Sun woke up from his contemplation and naturally recognized Yin Zhanxiu and the others. He even saw Xiao Ran, Yin Che, Wen Xiang, Su Xingfeng, and a few other acquaintances. After not seeing each other for many years, Lin Sun discovered that Yin Zhanxiu had already stepped into the 3 tribulations of longevity realm, and Xiao Ran, Su Xingfeng, and the others were also in the Extinction King realm. Speaking of which, they were all Lin Sun's enemies. But at this moment, Lin Sun was in no mood to care about them. No matter what, they were still Zhao Jingxuan's fellow disciples. Now that Zhao Jingxian had fallen into a deep sleep, Lin Sun didn't know when she would wake up. He also didn't want to take revenge on her fellow disciples in front of her. Put down junior sister Jingxian. Yin Zhanxiu's face was cold, and his killing intent burst forth. The others also looked unfriendly. They all knew how much Yin Zhanxiu liked Zhao Jingxian, but now, Zhao Jingxian was tightly held in the arms of their enemy, Lin Sun. How could they tolerate this? Lin Sun frowned, and his black eyes were cold. He said, "For Jingxian's sake, I won't make things difficult for you. Now, please leave." Yin Zhanxiu's face turned livid, and he laughed in anger. "I haven't settled the score with you yet, and you still dare to order us around? You're really arrogant." His voice was filled with thick, killing intent. "Lin Sun, it's indeed surprising that you're still alive, but do you think this is still 4 years ago?" Xiaoran said coldly, "Put down senior sister Zhao, and we can give you a chance to atone for your sins." Su Xingfeng and the others also spoke up. For years was enough to change too many things. Be it Yin Zhanxiu, Xiaoran, or the others, their strength had all undergone earth-shaking changes during this period of time. This made them fearless when facing Lin Sun. Don't make a mistake. Lin Sun had always been patient, but now, because Zhao Jingxian had sealed her divine soul, his state of mind had always been in a state of imbalance. The reason why he didn't make a move right now was because he was forcibly suppressing himself. Lin Sun. Suddenly, Yin Zhanxiu roared, and his figure floated into the air. Boom! Behind him, the void suddenly exploded, and endless blazing Taoist light burst forth, causing the heaven and earth to lose their color. A longevity Dharma idol appeared, like a god supporting the heaven and earth, and it shone brightly. On Yin Zhanxiu's body, shadows of true dragons appeared, causing his power to soar to the extreme, and it was boundlessly terrifying. Rumor had it that Yin Zhanxiu's mother's family was of the true dragon bloodline. Looking at this scene, it seemed to be true. At this moment, he stood in mid-air, pointed at Lin Sun from afar, and said, "If you have the guts, put down junior sister Zhao Jingxian and come fight me. I'll let you know how weak you are." His words were like thunder, resounding through the universe. At this moment, Yin Zhanxiu was like a god riding on a dragon, with an unparalleled spirit. "Lin Sun, did you hear that? If you have the guts, put down senior sister Zhao and fight senior brother Yin openly." Xiao Ran and the others said coldly. Obviously, they weren't afraid of Lin Sun, but they were afraid that Lin Sun would use Zhao Jingxian to threaten them. Lin Sun also understood the meaning of their words, and his black eyes instantly became incomparably cold. He put Zhao Jingxian aside lightly, and then slowly stood up. It was just a simple action, but an unparalleled power suddenly spread out from Lin Sun's body, as if a demon had awakened at this moment. The atmosphere in the field suddenly became tense. Seeing that you care so much about Jingshuan's safety, I can spare your lives, but you can be spared from death, but you can't escape punishment. Today, if I don't force you to kneel on the ground, I, Lin Sun, will be at your mercy. Lin Sun said coldly. His words were extremely domineering, but to Yin Zhanxiu and the others, it carried a strong sense of humiliation. Immediately, Su Xingfeng couldn't hold it in anymore and said angrily, "Arrogant. Even now, you're still so arrogant and reckless. You really deserve to die." Yin Zhanxiu was completely enraged. Tut! He suddenly let out a Dao sound. The shadow of a true dragon condensed, and its body was like a winding mountain. Its scales shone brightly, and it raised its head and roared. The dragon patterns on its head were clearly visible. Lin Sun, you're just a thief who secretly learned the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon. Today, I'll completely destroy you. With a roar, the true dragon in the void rushed toward Lin Sun. Lin Sun raised his eyes, and his pupils were cold. In his body, the ultimacy of the true dragon ran, and dazzling symbols of tribulation emerged and surrounded Lin Sun. At the same time, a vast, ancient, and majestic dragon power also burst out from Lin Sun's body. Eyes, with a dragon roar, the symbols of tribulation turned into a true dragon and soared into the sky. In 4 years, Lin Sun's control of the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon had already reached the level of dragon transformation. He was like a true dragon, and every move he made contained the power of a true dragon. Boom! The true dragon in the sky was directly torn apart by the claws of the true dragon that Lin Sun had manifested, and a rain of light exploded. What? Xiao ran, and the others' expressions changed. Everyone in the upper 9 realms knew that Yin Zhanxiu's combat strength was so strong that he had already entered the ranks of the Tianjiao Golden List and could be regarded as one of the top giants on the road to immortality. But now, as soon as he made a move, he suffered a defeat. The most incredible thing was that the Tao that Lin Sun used actually originated from the bloodline of the true dragon, but it was obviously stronger than Yin Zhanxiu's. Yin Zhanxiu was furious. Of course, he knew that Lin Sun used the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon, but he didn't expect that Lin Sun had already mastered this inheritance to such a level. This was the forbidden inheritance of the true dragon bloodline, and only the descendants with the bloodline of the true dragon could cultivate and master it. How did Lin Sun master it? Boom! Before Yin Zhanxiu could react, Lin Sun had already stepped into the void. In front of him, the true dragon raised its head and swung its tail, emitting a terrifying dragon power that made the heaven and earth tremble. "I want you to die." Yin Zhanxiu's eyes were bloodshot, and he rushed out violently. His aura also completely erupted to the extreme in an instant. Chapter 1261. In the sky, the battle had completely erupted. From afar, it looked like 2 dragons were biting and killing each other. The terrifying dragon might was like a landslide and a tsunami spreading in all directions. The rumbling dragon roars resounded throughout the entire universe. The ancient trees, rocks, and vines in the surrounding 500 kilometers were all affected, and they collapsed and exploded into pieces before transforming into powder that drifted in the air. Even the clouds in the sky had already collapsed. The void was in a mess, and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. Kill! Yin Zhanxiu's long hair danced wildly. He was like a mad demon as he performed the Tao and Dharma. Every move he made was filled with the power to destroy heaven and earth. After all, he was a supreme king who had stepped into the 3rd tribulation of longevity. Not only was he extremely talented, but his combat strength could also be said to be shocking. He was able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wang Xuanyu, Yi Mo, Mi Hongjin, and the others, and was regarded as one of the strongest powerhouses of the younger generation. His body glowed, and the dragons burst forth, whistling through the universe. The power was extremely dazzling. Although Xiao ran and the others were shaken, They couldn't feel happy at all. The reason was very simple. Although Yin Zhanxiu was ridiculously powerful, he was firmly suppressed by demon god Lin from the beginning of the battle. Until now, it was still the same. From afar, Lin Sun's figure was like a dream, emitting a thick and boundless dragon might. Every move he made was like a dragon shuttling through the clouds, invincible and invincible. Under his attack, all of Yin Zhanxiu's attacks were as fragile as paper. Bang! Suddenly, Yin Zhanxiu was struck by the dragon's tail, and his body was sent flying over 30 meters away. The clothes on his chest were torn apart, and a horrifying bloody wound was left on his exposed skin. Impossible! How did you master the secret of shedding dragons? Yin Zhanxiu's mind shook, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Previously, he was peerlessly arrogant, and he seemed to have a domineering attitude. His elegant demeanor was terrifying, but now he seemed angry and anxious, and he was in a state of disbelief. There are still many things you don't know. If you don't know, you'll only make a fool of yourself. In his calm voice, Lin Sun had already rushed forward. His figure was like a dragon, and so was he. He had the majesty of a dragon who dominated the mountains and rivers and roared proudly in the world. Being trapped at the bottom of Styx River for 4 years, and then passing through the unprecedented 3 tribulations, Lin Sun's combat power had long been incomparable with that of the past. As for the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon, he had learned from Zhao Jingxian that this inheritance was left behind by Master Lu and was sealed in the 9 Dragon Steel. Lin Sun had never encountered any difficulties ever since he started cultivating this method, so he didn't understand why Yin Zhanxiu was so agitated. However, if Yin Zhanxiu were to look at him the same way he did 4 years ago, then he would be making a huge mistake. Kill! Yin Zhanxiu roared in rage and unleashed everything he had learned in his life. Many years ago, in the competition of the Junior Tycoon ranking, as a bystander, he looked down on Lin Sun. Even though he was amazed by Lin Sun's potential at that time, he didn't regard Lin Sun as a worthy opponent. But in a short period of a few years, this young man that he didn't take seriously in the past had grown to such an extent. This caused him to feel slight disbelief, and he was unable to accept this. Bang! A moment later, Lin Sun directly smashed Yin Zhanxiu into the void with the Swanee seal, causing him to fall to the ground in a sorry state. How is this possible? Xiao Ran and the others were speechless, their hearts clutching. You deserve to die. With a roar, Yin Zhanxiu dashed up violently with disheveled hair and continued his slaughter. However, his handsome face had become vaguely ferocious, and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His whole body emitted an incomparably violent aura. Bang! But not long after, he was knocked into the air again, and the bones in his right arm were broken. His whole body fell down like a broken sandbag. The faces of Xiao Ran and the others were extremely ugly. Previously, they were all conceited and thought that their strength had undergone a tremendous transformation in the past 4 years, so they didn't have to fear Lin Sun. But now, they realized that Lin Sun's combat power had also undergone a transformation in the past 4 years, and he was many times stronger than 4 years ago. Just like now, even Yin Zhanxiu was no match for him. Yin Zhanxiu's long hair danced wildly, and smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. There was an indescribable sense of shame in his heart. How could he believe that a young man whom he had once looked down upon had now possessed combat power that could even injure him? Boom! He took out his treasures and continued his slaughter. It was as if he had gone completely mad. Quick, let's attack together. Xiao Ren shouted and took the lead to attack. He could tell that the current Lin Sun was no longer someone whom Yin Zhanxiu could contend with. If they didn't attack together, the consequences would be dire. Kill! Yin Che, Wen Xiang, Su Xingfeng, and the others attacked without hesitation. For a moment, the light of treasures and Taoism interweaved, and a dazzling glow swept towards Lin Sun from all directions. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and he said calmly, "A group attack again. Don't you feel ashamed? Or is this how the descendants of the Ling Bao Holy Land act?" Yin Zhanxiu and the others' faces darkened upon hearing this. How could they not feel ashamed and resentful after being mocked like this? However, they knew very well that if they didn't make a move now for the sake of face, it would be their turn when Yin Zhanxiu was defeated. Unfortunately, they didn't understand the gap between them and Lin Sun at all. Boom! Suddenly, Lin Sun's body glowed, and an impassioned dragon roar resounded around him. A total of 9 illusions of true dragons burst forth between heaven and earth. 9 dragons emerge, universe change. In an instant, the attacks that besieged Lin Sun all collapsed with a loud bang. As for Yin Zhanxiu, he was crushed to the ground by the 9 dragons. Blood spurted from his mouth and nose, and no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't get up. He couldn't even raise his head. Xiao ran, and the others stiffened, and their hearts were replaced by great terror. Only then did they realize that Lin Sun had been holding back during the battle with Yin Zhanxiu just now. This was undoubtedly too horrifying. It's your turn. Lin Sun's cold eyes emitted lightning, and his aura changed. He replaced the law of dragons with the law of water and performed the 9 strikes for shaking the heavens. In an instant, incomparably resplendent fist force whistled through the void, containing indestructible power. Wherever the fist force passed, cracks appeared in the void, and the sound of explosions was like thunder, so piercing that it almost burst one's eardrums. Xiao Ran and the others were also very strong. Being able to step into the absolute peak realm had already proved their strength. But compared to Yin Zhanxiu, they were still far behind. At this moment, even though they had besieged Lin Sun together, it only took a moment for them to be smashed into pieces by the fist force, and they were thrown off their feet, screaming in agony. Not long after, Xiao Ran and the others were all suppressed. One by one, they crawled on the ground with serious injuries and looked extremely miserable. At this moment, Lin Sun floated down from the void, and his black eyes swept across the crowd like lightning. He said, I didn't want to kill you this time for the sake of Jingxian. I hope you can remember this lesson. If you continue to be so thick-headed in the future, you won't be so lucky anymore. After saying that, he didn't even bother to look at Yin Zhanxiu and the others, and went straight to Zhao Jingxian. At this moment, he had already restrained his aura, and the cold, murderous intent in his black eyes was replaced by a touch of gentleness and regret. Jingxian, I'll take you away from here. Lin Sun didn't say much. He carefully carried Zhao Jingxian, placed her in the wordless pagoda, and then strode away. From the beginning to the end, he didn't pay any attention to Yin Zhanxiu and the others. Damn it! After a while, the place returned to silence, and Xiao Ran let out a resentful voice, gritting his teeth so hard that they almost broke. The expressions of the others were also extremely ugly. This time, they could be said to have suffered a crushing defeat. If news of this were to spread, they would definitely become a laughing stock in the upper 9 realms, and it would be difficult for them to raise their heads again. Who could have imagined that not only is Lin Sun still alive, but his combat strength has also become so terrifying? There were also people with bitter expressions. In the previous battle, Lin Sun easily won and suppressed them, and it was obvious that he didn't use his full strength. Facing such an enemy, it was simply hopeless. Senior sister Zhao has been taken away by him. What should we do? Someone said hesitantly. Then, everyone turned to look at Yin Zhanxiu in unison. At this time, Yin Zhanxiu's hair was disheveled, his body was covered with dust, and his mouth and nose were stained with blood. He looked extremely miserable and embarrassed. But surprisingly, his expression had returned to calmness, and only the occasional flash of cold light in his eyes proved that his heart was not as calm as it seemed. A loss is a loss. There's nothing to say. After a long silence, Yin Zhanxiu said in a deep voice, as for junior sister Jingxian, speaking of this, there was an obvious flash of pain on his face. He suddenly took a deep breath and said resolutely, even if she is with him now, the two of them are destined to be separated in the future. Lin Sun doesn't know how noble junior sister Jingxian is. If he dares to have bad intentions, sooner or later, a great disaster will befall him. This was not to vent the depression and hatred in his heart, but he knew that if Lin Sun wanted to become Zhao Jingshuan's Taoist companion, he was destined to encounter an unbearable blow. "Senior Brother Yin, what should we do now?" Su Xingfeng asked. "Lin Sun has disappeared for 4 years. Now that he has returned to the Upper Nine Realms, he will inevitably set off a big storm. Whether it is Ming Child or Gu Fozi, if they know this news, they will not sit still." Yin Zhanxio's eyes flickered. "We just need to wait for a good show." Everyone thought for a while and agreed with him. 4 years ago, it was Gu Fozi who personally set up a trap to sink Lin Sun under the Styx River. If he knew that Lin Sun was still alive, how could he remain indifferent? Similarly, Ming Child's hatred for Lin Sun was no less. Recently, the Upper Nine Realms has been peaceful. All the major forces are dormant, and many strong people are quietly improving and breaking through their own strength. But this peace is bound to be broken with the reappearance of Lin Sun. Yin Zhanxio took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "I'd like to see how Lin Sun will face those enemies." In fact, after saying so much, he just didn't want to admit one thing. That was after today's defeat, he had lost the idea of fighting against Lin Sun deep in his heart. P.S. Some people still remember that Goldfish said that there would be an outbreak in the middle of the month, but everyone also knows that what happened to Grandpa Goldfish has caused a setback in the plan made at the beginning of this month. Chapter 1262. The sky was blue and cloudless. Lin Sun walked in the void, his clothes fluttering in the wind. After 4 years, Lin Sun returned to the distant fire realm again. Feeling the rich spiritual energy between heaven and earth, Lin Sun couldn't help but be in a trance. But very soon, his gaze returned to being as calm as an ancient well. Zhao Jingxian had sealed her soul with the 6 god seals and was in a wonderful sleep. Her life was not in danger, which made Lin Sun feel a lot more at ease. Because Xia Ji had also slept like this, but now it was Zhao Jingxian. "As long as I'm alive, I'll definitely wait for you to wake up." Lin Sun murmured in his heart. In the wordless pagoda, Zhao Jingxian lay quietly on a jade platform polished from jade, her slender and fair hands holding the 9-dragon cauldron. Her black eyebrows were like ink, and her facial features were delicate and moist as if carved from fine jade. Her face was slightly thin, but she looked even more beautiful. Her cherry lips were slightly pursed, and her expression was serene and quiet. No one knew if she heard Lin Sun's voice, but a drop of tear fell quietly from the corner of her eye and evaporated. "Fellow Taoist, may I ask which blessed land Xinjian School is based in?" On the way, Lin Sun met a group of cultivators who were picking spiritual herbs. "Kongzhi Mountain, about 13,000 kilometers to the east. Thank you." After getting a definite answer, Lin Sun nodded to express his gratitude, and then his figure flashed away. After 4 years, the Upper Nine Realms had become completely different. Lin Sun planned to go to Xinjian School to find Ji Xingyao and ask about some things. At the same time, he wanted to inquire about Old Toad's whereabouts. "Why do I feel that guy looks like a person?" Among the cultivators who were picking spiritual herbs, one of them said doubtfully, "Who?" "Demon Lin." As soon as these 3 words came out, there was a sudden silence. This nickname represented a fierce person who was once famous all over the world. But immediately, there was laughter in the field. "Don't make trouble. Demon Lin died 4 years ago. If that person is Demon Lin, I can eat shit." The others were also amused and laughed. Only one person was still puzzled and murmured, "But that person really looks like Demon Lin." Kongzhi Mountain was one of the most famous blessed lands in the distant Fire Realm. Since the opening of the Upper Nine territories, this mountain had been occupied by the profound Sikh sword school. Even though it had experienced a few years of war, Kongzhi Mountain was still under the control of the profound Sikh sword school. But recently, the situation of the profound Inquisition swordhouse was quite tense. "This is already my 3rd time here. Brother Mo, Miss G, as the saying goes, no more than 3 times. Please don't make things difficult for me." Qi Yunfeng sat cross-legged before a table within a grand hall on Meditation Mountain, and his brows were knit together tightly as he gazed at Mo, Tianhe, Ji Xingyao, and the other disciples of the profound Inquiry Sword School. The atmosphere in the hall was gloomy. Everyone, including Mo, Tianhe, and Ji Xingyao, looked gloomy. Their hearts were filled with anger and heaviness. Qi Yunfeng was an ancient freak from the profound Nether Divine Palace. He was extremely talented and had a strong foundation. However, such a prodigy had already pledged allegiance to the underworld last year and became one of the underworld's 12 generals. The underworld had appeared 4 years ago, and it was established by the mysterious Nether Child that had emerged from the Nether God altar. During these 4 years of time, the underworld had risen domineeringly under the Nether Child's leadership, and it was now a colossus that could be ranked at the #1 position in the distant Fire Realm. There were 12 generals, 36 protectors, and all the disciples of the various powers under its command. It could be said to be filled with experts. Even if it was in the entire Upper Nine territories, the underworld was renowned, and it was sufficient to cause no power to underestimate it. Originally, all of this had nothing to do with the profound Inquisition Sword School. But not long ago, Qi Yunfeng had personally come looking for them, and he represented the will of the Nether Child with the intention of subduing the profound Inquisition Sword School and submitting to the underworld. This was naturally refused by Ji Xingyao, Mo, Tianhe, and the others without the slightest hesitation. As the disciples of the #1 sect in West Heaven Dimension, how could they be willing to submit to the underworld? However, Qi Yunfeng wasn't discouraged. When he came for the second time, he promised a great deal of extremely tempting benefits, and he even gave orders without leaving a trace. If the profound Inquisition Sword School just refused, then it would probably be viewed as a thorn by the underworld. Its future would be worrying. However, Ji Xingyao still refused flatly. There was no room for discussion in this matter at all. This time, it was the third time that Qi Yunfeng had come here, and he directly laid all his cards on the table. Things couldn't be done more than 3 times, so he had to put an end to this matter. Qi Yunfeng, to think that you're a reputable figure, yet you're willing to become the lackey of another now. How disappointing. Ji Xingyao's voice was chilly. Miss Ji, that's because you don't understand the resources and reserves of His Highness, the Nether Child. Following behind him is sufficient for you to obtain unimaginable fortune and benefits. Qi Yunfeng didn't mind the ridicule in Ji Xingyao's words at all, and he said calmly, moreover, the competition in the Upper Nine territories has become even more brutal. Only by advancing and retreating together with His Highness, the Nether Child, might we be able to continue rising up. He paused for a moment and continued. Small fries are bound to be unable to survive. I presume all of you are clearly aware that numerous powers with inferior strengths in the Upper Nine territories have already been swallowed by the various overlord powers. Do all of you think that the profound Inquisition Sword School can stay out of this with its current strength? These words caused the atmosphere in the hall to become even more deathly silent and oppressive. Bang! Mo, Tianhe slapped the table before him into pieces, and he said with an icy, cold expression, Qi Yunfeng, to think that I took you to be a friend in the past. Never had I imagined that you would actually become so shameless now. Let me tell you, I'm not interested if you like to be the dog of another. In an instant, the hearts of everyone shook. However, Qi Yunfeng's face sank, and he said with an emotionless expression, Brother Mo, if I didn't take you to be a friend, do you think I would have come over to persuade you 3 times in succession? Face is something that you have to fight for. If you continue to be thick-headed, then Kongzhi Mountain will probably have a new owner from today onward. This was equivalent to completely shedding all pretenses. In an instant, all the disciples of the profound Inquisition Sword School couldn't sit still any longer, and their expressions changed indeterminately. In other words, if we refuse again today, then you'll become enemies with us? Ji Xingyao took a deep breath and asked coldly. At this moment, Qi Yunfeng sighed lightly and said, To tell you the truth, The surroundings of Kongja Mountain have already been controlled by the forces of my nether earth. If all of you don't give me a satisfactory answer, then a calamity of blood might descend here. Just these words alone were like a cold torrent that caused the atmosphere in the entire hall to instantly freeze. Everyone's breathing stopped while their expressions turned grim. Only now did they realize that Qi Yunfeng had actually come prepared. "You're going too far." Mo Tianhe was furious, and he almost gnashed his teeth into pieces. "Brother Mo, please calm your rage. This is a last resort. Not to mention that I'm only acting on orders, so I hope you don't make it difficult for me." Qi Yunfeng was very composed, and seemed as if victory was within his grasp. "Aren't you afraid that we'll detain you?" asked Ji Xingyao. Qi Yunfeng grinned. "Since I dare to come here, do you think I wouldn't have considered that? Everyone, I'll say it again, I really don't want to become enemies with all of you." Ji Xingyao went silent while her beautiful face flickered indeterminately. On the other hand, the eyes of Mo Tianhe and the others were filled with hatred. Never had they imagined that there would actually come a day when their profound Sikh sword school would be coerced like this. They're simply going too far. This time, including me, there's a total of 4 generals and 8 protectors for my netherworld. If we use force, then we'll be able to swallow this place in less than 15 minutes. Qi Yunfeng spoke once more, and the content of his words caused everyone to shudder with fear. So, I hope that all of you can reconsider. Please don't be impulsive and ruin the future of the profound Sikh sword school in the region of Ultimatum. The atmosphere in the hall grew even more silent. However, right at this moment, a wave of footsteps resounded from outside the hall. The person hadn't arrived when a panicked voice resounded. "Senior Brother Poison, can you come out for a moment?" It was Yin Shui. Just like Qi Yunfeng, she was from the profound Nether Divine Palace. At that time, she'd once headed to the Nether River Forbidden Area with Lin Sun and the others to search for fortuitous encounters. Qi Yunfeng frowned and said, "What's the matter?" The gazes of Ji Xingyao, Mo Tianhe, and the others were drawn over as well. They acutely noticed that Yin Shui's expression at this moment actually carried indescribable panic and absent-mindedness, and she seemed as if she'd encountered something she couldn't understand. This, Yin Shui was a little hesitant. "Just say it," Qi Yunfeng said expressionlessly. He was about to completely frighten Mo Tianhe and the others and reap the fruits of victory, but he was interrupted by Yin Shui. He was quite unhappy in his heart. Yin Shui's beautiful face was gloomy and her voice was bitter with a kind of trance. "Lin, fellow practitioner Lin Sun, is here." Qi Yunfeng was stunned at first, and then his whole body stiffened. The wine cup in his hand that he had just picked up trembled, and the fragrant wine spilled. But he didn't notice it at all. Instead, he asked in astonishment, "Who did you say?" Ji Xingyao and the others were also stunned. In the past 4 years, the name of Lin Sun had rarely been mentioned. But now, Yin Shui actually said that Lin Sun was here. How could it be possible? Yin Shui was also in a trance. Being stared at by Qi Yunfeng, she had to bite the bullet and said, "It's fellow practitioner Lin Sun. He's still alive." Crash! The table in front of Qi Yunfeng was suddenly overturned, and the wine cups and cups were scattered on the ground. He suddenly stood up with a gloomy face and reprimanded. "Nonsense! For years ago, he was already a dead man. How could he show up again?" Yin Shui shivered all over and said, But it's true. He is at the foot of the mountain now. It's absolutely true. It's impossible." Qi Yunfeng said flatly. There was a kind of unspeakable irritation in his heart, and he was no longer as calm and composed as before. For years ago, he had witnessed how Lin Sun showed great power on the divine Nether altar and forced Ming Child to retreat. He was extremely fearful of this person, but he didn't expect that he would hear the news of this person again at this time. Moreover, he was still alive? How could it be possible? At this time, Ji Xingyao and Mo Tianhe were also surprised and doubtful. Could it be that Lin Sun was really not dead? If that was the case, it was a piece of good news. At the thought of this, Ji Xingyao and the others were refreshed. They all knew how powerful Lin Sun was. If he could help, they might be able to solve the current dilemma. Chapter 1263. Suddenly, Qi Yunfeng glanced at Ji Xingyao and the others and said coldly, "Even if Lin Sun is alive, he's bound to be unable to save all of you. Don't forget that Kongzishan Mountain has been surrounded by the forces of the underworld." The expressions of Ji Xingyao and the others changed slightly. According to what Qi Yunfeng said, the underworld had sent a total of 4 divine generals and 8 protectors this time, and it was a force that could make anyone's heart tremble. Those who could become divine generals were all formidable figures who had stepped into the 3rd tribulation of the longevity realm. For example, Qi Yunfeng, an ancient freak who had walked out of the Xianming divine mansion in the Saint Retreat, was only ranked among the 12 divine generals of the underworld. On the other hand, although the protectors of the underworld were slightly inferior to the divine generals, they were also peerless kings who had passed the longevity tribulation, and their combat strength couldn't be underestimated. It was no exaggeration to say that the forces that had besieged Kongzishan Mountain today were sufficient to make these descendants of the profound sword school despair. As for Lin Sun, even if he was really alive, he was only one person after all. How could his appearance change the situation of Kongzishan Mountain? Thinking of this, the wisp of hope that had just risen in the hearts of Ji Xingyao and the others dimmed, and their hearts sank to rock bottom. Qi Yunfeng had regained his composure at this moment, and he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Fighting the underworld? It was like hitting a rock with an egg. Let's go and see if it's really Lin Sun. Qi Yunfeng turned around and walked out. Yin Shui hurriedly followed him. Ji Xingyao and Mo Tianhe looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. Let's go and have a look as well. If it's really Lin Sun, then quickly persuade him to leave. We can't involve him in the affairs of the profound sword school. Mo Tianhe said in a low voice. Ji Xingyao nodded. It should have been a happy thing to know that Lin Sun was still alive, but now she couldn't feel happy at all. Kongzishan Mountain was thousands of meters high, and it was steep and lofty. At this moment, Lin Sun stood at the foot of the mountain and looked up at Kongzishan Mountain for a while. He suddenly said, "Tell me, what exactly are you here for?" Jean Lucio's expression changed indeterminately, and he was hesitant. Back in the Styx Forbidden Land, Lin Sun had given him an Yin Shui Ball of origin Taoist fire, which made him feel grateful to this day. But now he couldn't face Lin Sun. There are many experts hiding in the vicinity. I can sense that they're extremely hostile towards me. Lin Sun stared at Jean Lucio quietly with his dark eyes. His divine soul was so powerful that he instantly captured many abnormalities in the nearby area. Brother Lin, listen to my advice. You should leave as soon as possible. Times are different now. There are many things you don't understand. Jean Lucio lowered his head, not daring to meet Lin's eyes. He didn't know how to explain to Lin Sun about Qi Yunfeng submitting to the underworld. Get out of my way. A cold light suddenly burst out of Lin Sun's eyes, which made Jean Lucio tremble. He hurriedly said, "Brother Lin, you mustn't act rashly. Kongzha Mountain has already been surrounded, and it'll be extremely dangerous if you head over now." After saying that, his heart thumped and he cursed inwardly. When he looked up, he saw that Lin Sun's face had become cold. "For the sake of our friendship in the past, I won't argue with you. Now get out of my way." Lin Sun's voice was calm, but there was a kind of intimidating power in it, which made Jean Lucio feel cold all over and subconsciously step aside. "How dare you?" But at this moment, a thunderous shout sounded. With the voice, a figure rushed out. His whole body was like a burning flame, exuding violent momentum. It was a young man with a gloomy face and a fiery robe. Jean Lucio's face changed greatly, and he exclaimed, "Protector Xuefeng, please stop." Xuefeng, one of the 36 protectors of the underworld, was a top figure from the Snowfire Condor. He was bloodthirsty and ruthless, and had the combat power of the 2nd tribulation of longevity. "Who do you think you are? How dare you order me?" Xuefeng's voice was cold. He didn't care about Jean Lucio at all. As soon as he rushed out, he chopped at Lin Sun with his palm and fingers like knives. However, Lin Sun's figure disappeared at this moment. "What?" Xuefeng was stunned. Crack! At the same time, a big hand appeared behind him and crushed his neck. He completely lost consciousness and died on the spot. Jean Lucio was stunned. In his eyes, Lin Sun just flashed in the air and killed Shui Feng with a raise of his hand. From the beginning to the end, Shui Feng didn't have time to react. It was too easy, like killing an ant. When he looked at Lin Sun again, Jean Lucio's eyes had become completely different. Shui Feng was a peerless king of the second tribulation of longevity, but he was killed by Lin Sun in an instant. What a cruel method. It seems that it should be the real demon god Lin. I didn't expect that he is still alive. A burst of noise sounded in all directions. Many figures walked out from the darkness. They were densely packed, and there were at least 10 of them. Each of them had a strong aura. Especially the 2 men and 1 woman, who stood there made the wind and clouds change, the world tremble, and the void wail. These were 3 immortal generals of the underworld, and each of them had a strong combat power that was not weaker than the 3 tribulations of longevity. In addition, the others should not be underestimated. It could be said that in the distant fire realm, just this force in front of them was enough to make any force feel afraid. As soon as they appeared, they fixed their eyes on Lin Sun. There was surprise, confusion, and coldness on their faces. In fact, they recognized Lin Sun as soon as he arrived, but they didn't expect that this young man, who was thought to be dead 4 years ago, was still alive. This was obviously incredible. But now, with Lin Sun killing Shui Feng with 1 blow, they finally dared to conclude that the person in front of them must be Demon God Lin. Only he would have the guts to act so fearlessly in front of them. Haha, interesting. A dead man appeared after 4 years. Lin Sun, do you want to tell us where you have been hiding in these 4 years? The female general in the lead chuckled. She was wearing a colorful dress, charming and enchanting. Her skin was snow white and delicate, and her peach blossom eyes were watery and charming. Her name was Yu Liangyin, an ancient freak whose foundation was absolutely not inferior to Qi Yinfeng. She was also a devil who killed without batting an eye. Everyone couldn't help laughing. Hiding? That was a good word. Jean Lucio looked at Lin Sun with a worried expression, but he was surprised to find that Lin Sun didn't look at Yu Liangyin and the others from the beginning to the end. It seemed that he had directly ignored their existence. Jean Lucio now, can you tell me what happened here? Lin Sun's voice became colder and colder. Jean Lucio swallowed his saliva with difficulty. When he was about to speak, he heard a hearty laughter coming from Kongja Mountain. Ha ha, it's really Brother Lin. It's really unexpected. Qi Yunfeng's figure appeared out of thin air, looking down from the void with a smile on his face, but his eyes seemed unscrupulous as he looked Lin Sun up and down. Beside him, Yin Shui felt uncomfortable and didn't dare to look at Lin Sun. Like Jean Lucio, she felt a trace of guilt in her heart and couldn't face Lin Sun. I didn't expect to see you again in the territory of Xianwen Sword House today. Lin Sun looked cold. As early as in the Forbidden Land of Styx, Qi Yunfeng's performance repeatedly disappointed Lin Sun, but Lin Sun didn't care about it. Everyone had his own ambition, and he couldn't ask Qi Yunfeng to be of one mind. But now, in the action of besieging Kongja Mountain, even if Qi Yunfeng wasn't the mastermind, he must be an important figure. This made Lin Sun despise him. No matter what you think, to tell you the truth, we're here to discuss an important matter with Xianwen Sword House. If Brother Lin is interested, why don't you stay and listen with us? Qi Yunfeng smiled calmly and calmly. 4 years ago, he didn't dare to talk to Lin Sun like this. Things changed with the passage of time. Everything was different now. Lin Sun, don't listen to his nonsense. Go. Qi Yunfeng has become a minion of Ming Child, and this time he came to annex the forces of Xianwen Sword House. Suddenly, a chilly voice resounded. Then, Lin Sun saw Ji Xingyao. She was still as beautiful as before, like a fairy coming out of a painting. However, at this moment, her face showed hatred, anger, worry, and other expressions. She seemed to be very emotional. At the same time, Emo Tianhe and a group of successors of Xianwen Sword House also appeared one after another. Qi Yunfeng frowned when his purpose was exposed, but he didn't take it seriously. In his opinion, Lin Sun's arrival was unable to change everything in front of him. He was even a little happy. He thought to himself that if he could capture Lin Sun and offer him to Ming Child, it would definitely be a great contribution. I see, Lin Sun finally understood. When he looked at Qi Yunfeng and others again, his eyes had become cold and deep. After 4 years, Taoism fellow, Qi really makes me look at you with new eyes. Lin Sun said indifferently. Qi Yunfeng laughed. People change. Didn't we come to the apex region, this time for the sake of seeking a great change on our path towards the Tao? Lin Sun said, no, I mean you've changed. You've become too shameless and shameless. Qi Yunfeng's face suddenly darkened, and his eyes were full of killing intent. Why do you talk so much nonsense with him? Go. Ji Xingyao frowned and was worried. Go. Is it possible? Qi Yunfeng sneered. Since you're here, don't leave. I believe Lord Ming Child will be very surprised if he can see you after 4 years. At the foot of the mountain, Yu Liangyin and others couldn't help laughing with a confident attitude. It was indeed an unexpected surprise to meet Lin Sun, who had disappeared for 4 years on this crusade against Xianwen Sword House. All of them were clearly aware of how Lord Netherchild couldn't forget Chen Shi. To Lin Sun's surprise, at this time, even Jean Lucio and Yin Shui also transmitted their voices to persuade him to leave quickly to avoid accidents. This made Lin Sun understand that perhaps Qi Yunfeng had completely changed, but at least Jean Lucio and Yin Shui still kept a conscience. Chapter 1264. Lin Sun decided to stay. Both Ji Xingyao and Mo Tianhe were in a daze. They were both anxious and moved. Lin Sun didn't have to do this, but he chose to stay, which undoubtedly showed that he regarded them as his friends. Si Yunfeng sneered. Brother Lin, you are so bold. After 4 years, you are more elegant than before. However, since you choose to stay, you'd better not do anything stupid. Otherwise, I'm afraid you will get into trouble. He was very confident, and his words carried a hint of wisdom in them. Of course, there was also a threat. Ho ho! Yu Liangyin and others all laughed. Many people looked at Lin Sun provocatively. I think, with this guy's temper, he will definitely do something stupid. For example, just now, he killed fellow practitioner Xiefeng because of a disagreement. A black-clothed young man who was as strong as an iron tower said in a muffled voice. In this case, it's useless to talk nonsense. It's better for me to kill fellow practitioner Lin Sun who has come back from the dead. There was a touch of fanaticism in his voice, as if he was staring at his favorite prey. The black-clothed young man was Tuo Tung, one of the 12 generals of the underworld. He was addicted to fighting, and his favorite thing was to hunt down well-known, outstanding peers. Now he was staring at Lin Sun. Si Yunfeng frowned, but he didn't stop him. As one of the 12 generals, although he was responsible for this action, he couldn't really command Tuo Tung and Yu Liangyin. It's good to let this guy test Lin Sun's strength. Si Yunfeng's eyes flickered. After 4 years, he was confident that he was not afraid of Lin Sun's threat. But out of caution, he didn't dare to kill Lin Sun directly. After all, Lin Sun used to make him feel extremely afraid. How about it? Do you dare to fight with me? Don't worry, I promise I won't kill you. Tuo Tung's eyes were gloomy, exuding an excited and violent aura. How dare you? Mo Tianhe's face darkened. How about we play together? He didn't like these guys. They regarded Lin Sun as a fish on the chopping board like a cat playing with a mouse. He couldn't stand their arrogant attitude anymore. Don't be anxious. Wait for me to slowly torture this whatever demonic godlin to death. Then I'll deal with you. Tuo Tung grinned, his words extremely arrogant. However, everyone knew that he had the right to be arrogant. As one of the 12 generals of the underworld, his cultivation had already reached the 3rd tribulation of longevity. Moreover, he was an ancient freak himself. His backing was great, far surpassing his peers. Brother Mo, calm down. I haven't shown myself in the world for 4 years, and now any Tom, Dick, or Harry dares to provoke me. Since this animal is courting death, then I'll naturally slaughter it myself. Lin Sun opened his mouth. His voice was indifferent, but it resounded clearly in the audience. Gasps could be heard from the audience. Lin Sun had to admit that although he had been silent for 4 years, his unscrupulous nature had not changed at all. Tuo Tung's expression had already turned gloomy. Cats and dogs? Evil creature? In the upper 9 realms, who dare to slander and humiliate him like this? No, I've changed my mind. This time, I'll let you die a horrible death. He stretched out a hand and pointed at Lin Sun in the distance, his eyes full of boiling, killing intent. Boom! As he spoke, Tuo Tung's figure flashed, and he was like a god of berserkers that had descended into the world. His robust body that was like an iron tower glowed, and a gigantic totem dharma idol floated up into appearance behind him, causing the world to instantly darken while droning and wailing. Many people held their breath and retreated, lest they would be affected. They all knew that Tuo Tung was a battle-crazed lunatic. Once the battle started, he would not recognize his friends. Go to hell. With a roar, heaven and earth roared. Tuo Tung waved his fist, and a blood-red fist force burst out, evolving into horrible visions such as limitless purgatory and white skeletons. Even a void was collapsing. This punch was domineering and had the power to shock the soul. Many strong men felt a stinging pain in their eyes, and their hair stood on end. This was the supreme king of the third tribulation of longevity. After passing the calamity of soul, heart, and body, the nature of his life had already become completely different. Just like this punch, most people in the field were afraid of it. Boom! Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. He stood still, only his right palm clenched into a fist and burst out in the void. It was simple, neat, and gave off a feeling of returning to simplicity. It was otherworldly, but when this punch swept out, the blood-red fist force suddenly showed a trace of sluggishness, and then it buzzed as if it could not bear the burden. In the end, it exploded with a bang, and the sky was full of blood-red light rain. But Lin Sun's fist force did not lose momentum and rushed over at an incredible speed. All of this happened very fast, although it seemed slow. When Tuo Tung reacted, Lin Sun's fist force had arrived. Bang! In the next moment, his body that was robust like an iron tower was forcefully blasted flying, and the muffled bang caused the hearts of everyone present here to jerk fiercely while their expressions changed slightly. One punch sent an underworld general flying. Looking up, Tuo Tang's chest armor was broken, and there was a sunken fist mark. His chest was almost broken. His face was red and ferocious, as if he couldn't believe it. Then he grinned and said, "Good. It's satisfying to hunt prey like you. If you are too weak, it will be disappointing." Boom! His aura suddenly changed, and strange blood-colored Tao patterns appeared around his body. The totem Dharma idol appeared behind him, and his blood chi shook the heavens. And in his hand, a blood-red spear appeared. With a slight shake, it rushed to Lin Sun again. "Unfortunately, you are still too weak for me," Lin Sun said indifferently. His clothes were fluttering, and he stepped into the void. His fist force was like lightning and bubbles, with an indescribable sense of mystery. "Do you look down on me?" Tuo Tang's face was gloomy. While talking, Lin Sun's fist force had already burst out and smashed on the blood-red spear. Buzz! The blood-red spear let out a shrill whine, which made many strong people feel a stabbing pain in their souls and almost coughed up blood. Tuo Tung flew out like a sandbag, with blood spurting from his mouth and nose. Lin Sun's fist force seemed to be invincible, and he was seriously injured in an instant. Swish! Almost at the same time, Lin Sun rushed out at a faster speed than Tuo Tung. Another punch fell from the sky. Bang! Although Tuo Tung tried his best to resist, Lin Sun took the initiative. Tuo Tung's arms exploded directly, and then Lin Sun's fist force hit him. Tuo Tung hit the ground hard like a meteorite, creating a big pit. The soil splashed, and the earth shook. "I don't look down on you, but I have never taken you seriously. Are you satisfied with my answer?" Lin Sun floated down in front of the big pit, looking down at Tuo Tung in the pit with a cold look. Clang! At this time, the blood-red spear that had been blown away by Lin Sun's fist force fell from the air and stuck on the ground, shaking. It could be imagined how fast this series of attacks was. P.S. This chapter is a little short. I'm really hungry. I'll write 2 more chapters in the evening after the goldfish has dinner. Yes, I'll write 2 more chapters in the evening. Chapter 1265. The whole place was silent. Not a sound could be heard. The battle had ended in just a few blinks of an eye. From the beginning until the end, Buddha Tung had been completely crushed and hadn't been able to resist at all. This was too shocking. Everyone's mind went blank for a moment. Over the past 4 years, the strength of every expert present had improved by leaps and bounds. This was also the reason why Qi Yunfeng and others dared to provoke Lin Sun. However, they didn't expect that Lin Sun's combat capability had become completely different in the past 4 years. This was beyond their expectations. As far as everyone knew, Lin Sun was attacked by Gu Fozi and died under Styx River 4 years ago. Being able to come back to life was already astounding and difficult to imagine, let alone the transformation of his combat strength. Qi Yunfeng's heart tightened, and he said, "Brother Lin, puff." Before Tuo Tong could finish speaking, Lin Sun made his move and chopped off his head. His movements were clean and neat, and a mass of scarlet and hot blood splashed out. Not even Tuo Tong's nascent divinity had been able to escape. In an instant, the atmosphere here was deathly silent. No matter if it was Ji Xingyao, the other disciples of the profound Inquiry Sword School, or the experts of the Nether Earth like Qi Yunfeng, all of their pupils had dilated while shock arose in their hearts. Tuo Tong was a warrior, an ancient freak with the cultivation of the 3rd tribulation of longevity. He was killed just like that. For a moment, everyone's expression changed. So, you've already stepped into the longevity 3rd tribulation realm during the 4 years you disappeared. No wonder you're so confident and fearless. In the silent atmosphere, Qi Yunfeng's expression was gloomy. His eyes flickered as he spoke coldly. His voice was filled with sudden understanding, shock, and fear. 3 tribulations of longevity. Quite a number of people reacted at that moment and could not help but gasp. Not only had Fiend God Lin revived from the dead, but his combat strength had also undergone a complete transformation. For a time, everyone looked at Lin Sun with different eyes. The experts of the underworld were furious. On the other hand, Ji Xingyao and the others felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders, and the worry in their hearts had been completely replaced by a wisp of indescribable happiness. A general like Tuo Tong was the strongest person in the underworld earth forces. But in Lin Sun's hands, the Tuo vine was as vulnerable as clay chickens and pottery dogs. In this way, even if Lin Sun was alone, as long as he was there, he had the ability to solve the predicament of Xianwen's sword house. Ji Xingyao and the others understood this, and so did Yi Yunfeng and the others. They couldn't remain calm in their hearts. Which Tom, Dick, or Harry wants to challenge me? Lin Sun's black eyes glanced at the audience. His clothes and thick black hair fluttered in the wind, giving him a kind of overlooking the crowd. If Lin Sun dared to say so before, he would be regarded as arrogant and reckless. However, things were different now. Even so, the experts of the underworld still felt angry and aggrieved when Lin Sun treated them like cats and dogs. Lin Sun, don't be arrogant. You're only one person. No matter how strong you are, how can you fight against the underworld? An underworld law protector rank expert shouted. Thump. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he stopped breathing. His body stiffened and he fell to the ground. The hearts of everyone shook. They discerned that even though this person's body was completely unharmed, his soul core had been destroyed. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't make a move at all. He didn't even look at this person. Are you bullying me with numbers? With me here, how can I let you do as you wish? Little Silver appeared out of thin air. His handsome face was full of arrogance and coldness. Even his voice was cold and emotionless. Everyone's pupils constricted as they realized that Little Silver was extraordinary. He clearly hadn't passed the longevity tribulation, but he'd just silently killed a supreme king of the longevity realm. Demon God Lin was already so powerful that it made people's hearts tremble. Now, there was a white-clothed man with an extremely strange aura and abnormal combat strength. It was very terrifying. In fact, even Lin Sun was a little surprised at this moment. His eyelids twitched. Although he knew that Little Silver had also set foot in the Extinction King realm, he didn't expect that Little Silver, who had evolved into a god-devouring bug king, could kill a supreme king of the longevity realm. Even Lin Sun was surprised by such means. The hearts of the experts of the underworld became heavy, and they were no longer as confident and domineering as before. Since Lin Sun appeared until now, he'd first easily crushed Protector Shui Feng to death, and then crushed Tua Tung General easily. Yet now, just a white-clothed man by his side had unexpectedly killed one of their protectors. This was like a series of heavy hammers that smashed fiercely on their hearts, causing their fighting spirit to start shaking. They realized that the situation had changed with Lin Sun's arrival. On the other hand, Ji Xingyao and the other disciples of the profound Inquiry Sword School couldn't help but reveal joy on their faces. Of course, they could see that the situation had turned around. Brother Lin, are you going to become enemies with the underworld? Si Yinfeng took a deep breath and spoke with a gloomy expression. He was very unwilling. Earlier, they were about to force the profound Inquiry Sword School to submit. But who would have thought that Lin Sun's arrival would be like an unexpected disaster that completely disrupted their plans? How could he be willing to accept this? So what if I'm enemies with the underworld? Do you, Qi Yinfeng, think that I will be threatened by you? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. Forget it. I'll give you face today. Let's go. Si Yunfeng's face was livid. He was very decisive. Realizing that the situation was not right, he immediately chose to retreat. Go. Did I agree? Lin Sun's words made Si Yunfeng's heart skip a beat, and his expression immediately changed. He said sternly, Lin Sun, I've given you enough face for the sake of the past. Don't be so ungrateful. Do you know how terrible the consequences of offending the underworld will be? Although it was a threat, it was also a fact. In the upper 9 realms, the forces of the underworld were like overlords, and their rise was eye-catching and almost unstoppable. In the past 4 years, under the threat of the underworld, countless forces had either chosen to surrender or be directly annexed. The profound Inquiry Sword School was powerful enough, but it was forced into a predicament today. If Lin Sun hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. When they heard this, Mo Tianhe and Ji Xingyao calmed down. After weighing the pros and cons, they really didn't want Lin Sun to form an irreconcilable blood feud with such a great force. But before they could persuade him, Lin Sun had already said with a sneer, if it wasn't for the past, do you think I could tolerate your nonsense until now? Also, the underworld has already offended me. Sooner or later, I will personally settle the score with the underworld child. At the end of his words, his voice carried a touch of biting cold, killing intent. Why did Zhao Jingxian choose to seal his own soul? He was forced to do so. If Wang Ziying and the others hadn't forced him that day, how could such a thing have happened? And Wang Ziying and the others were also the lackeys of the underworld child. There was a silence in the field, and everyone gasped. After disappearing for 4 years, as soon as Demon God Lin came back, he wanted to settle the score with the forces of the underworld led by the underworld child. If this was spread out, it would definitely cause a storm in the upper 9 realms. If Si Yinfeng was a little flustered and exasperated, or in other words, he was frightened by the killing intent revealed in Lin Sun's words, so he seemed surprised and angry at the same time. Enough! Lin Sun suddenly rose into the air, and his whole body glowed. An invisible and terrifying aura also spread out in all directions. All of a sudden, the wind and clouds surged, and the world changed. Let's fight. In a calm and indifferent voice, Lin Sun moved like lightning, like a flowing rainbow, and was untraceable. Puff! Several underworld strongmen who were closest to Lin Sun were beheaded in an instant, so there was only a muffled sound. Then heads rolled down and blood sprinkled in the void. At the same time, people saw clearly that it was a broken blade, but it was illusory, as light as a feather, holy and ethereal. Kill! Si Yunfeng's eyes were red, and he realized that if he didn't fight, it would be impossible for him to leave safely. He rushed up violently. However, at the moment, he was at the top of Kongsha Mountain, and Mo Tianhe, Ji Xingyao, and the others were standing near him. The moment he moved, Mo Tianhe and Ji Xingyao also attacked. They hated Si Yunfeng to the core. Cut the crap. The battle has finally begun. Because of me, my god-eater insect lineage has gained an unprecedented supreme king. We will naturally live up to the reputation left behind by our ancestor. As he murmured, little Silver, who looked extremely cold, disappeared into thin air. Puff! At the same time, a strong man of the underworld, who was dozens of feet away from little Silver, died silently on the spot. His divine soul was smashed by the incomparably sharp sword intent. Puff! Very soon, another protector-level powerhouse was caught off guard and had his divine soul destroyed. This was the horror of the spirit-eating insects. When they attacked, they were invisible, and ordinary people couldn't detect them at all. And their attacks were like the most ruthless assassins in the world. Once they attacked, they would definitely kill with one blow. They killed one person in 10 steps and left no trace for 1,000 miles. Boom! In the battlefield, Lin Sun launched an attack as well. His figure was brilliant as he swept through the world, and the attacks he released with every single move he made carried a might that was sufficient to make ghosts and gods retreat. When looked at from afar, everywhere he passed, the bodies of numerous experts would explode into pieces, and he seemed to be sweeping through everything before him with a peerless and invincible bearing. For a time, the field was filled with blood and screams. It was chaotic. It was not that those underworld strongmen were weak, but that Lin Sun had become so powerful that they could only look up to him. Under such circumstances, killing them was no different from tearing paintings. Go to hell. Suddenly, a cold and delicate voice sounded. Yu Liangyin, one of the 12 generals of the underworld, attacked. She looked charming and enchanting, but she was carrying a huge black iron awl in her white and slender hand. As she waved it, black light swept out and the void burst. The power of killing was extremely fierce and terrible. She attacked Lin Sun from behind at an incredible speed. Buzz! However, as the broken blade appeared like a rainbow, Lin Sun performed the birth and destruction cut. First, her black iron pillar, which had been cultivated for several years, was easily cut into 2 pieces. Then from between her eyebrows, a line of blood extended straight through the bridge of her nose, red lips, neck, chest, abdomen. Chapter 1266. During the battle, Ji Xingyao glanced at the foot of the mountain worriedly. A group of underworld powerhouses gathered there. What would happen to Lin Sun, who was among them? It was this one glance that allowed her to witness an incomparably bloody scene. Yu Liangyin, this extremely enchanting and charming peerless beauty, had her body split into 2 at this moment, and it was split straight down the middle. This kind of death was undoubtedly exceptionally bloody when it happened to a beautiful and charming woman. Ji Xingyao's clear eyes couldn't help shrinking, and she almost cried out. Yu Liangyin was not only a charming beauty, she was also an ancient freak with extremely ruthless methods. But she was killed just like that. This guy is getting more and more abnormal. Ji Xingyao muttered in her heart. At the foot of the mountain, the battle was fierce, and blood was everywhere. Some people fled in panic, but halfway there, they were either killed by Broken Blade or killed by Little Silver. This undoubtedly caused them to feel despair. In addition to Yu Liangyin and Tuo Tong, there was also a warlord among these underworld powerhouses. It was a thin and powerful swordsman with a bloody sword in his hand. The aura he showed was even stronger than that of Yu Liangyin and others. But to Lin Sun's surprise, as soon as the battle began, the young man named Zhang Yuan fled decisively. Moreover, he used a secret treasure, so his speed was extremely fast. Even Lin Sun and Silver missed him. However, Zhang Yuan's escape further accelerated the speed of these underworld powerhouses' defeat. Soon after Yu Liangyin was killed, the field was full of broken corpses. Except for Zhang Yuan, all of them were killed. The strong smell of blood filled the void, which was extremely pungent. This was like a scene from purgatory. Standing in it, Lin Sun, who was spotless, seemed out of place but also had a shocking impact. On the top of the mountain, the battle had also ended. Qi Yinfeng, who was alone, was besieged by Mo Tianhe, Ji Xingyao, and other descendants of Xianwen Sword House. He couldn't hold on at all, and it didn't take long for him to kneel down. Previously, Qi Yinfeng was confident of winning, talking and laughing calmly, and didn't take anyone seriously at all. At this moment, he was kneeling on the ground. His clothes were tattered and dyed with blood, his hair disheveled, and his entire body was covered in severe injuries. Even breathing was difficult for him. When they noticed Lin Sun walking over, all the disciples of profound Ask Sword School nearby revealed a solemn expression, and they revealed expressions of admiration and admiration as they took the initiative to make way for him. For years ago, Lin Sun was already all-powerful and was regarded as Demon Lin, which made people pale at the mere mention of him. Yet now he'd come back to life. It was like he'd undergone rebirth, and he was even more elegant than before. Oh, I've calculated everything, but I didn't expect that Lin Sun is still alive. God is really blind. Qi Yinfeng raised his head with great difficulty. His face was covered in bloodstains, and it was hideous and warped. His voice was filled with unwillingness and hatred. Yes, he thought that today's defeat was entirely due to Lin Sun. The great Tao is like the heavens. Aren't you afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens by venting your resentment like this? Lin Sun glanced at him with no pity in his heart. We cultivators have always taken the path of defying the heavens. Who has ever feared the heavens? Lin Sun, don't be complacent. You probably don't know that the son of hell has already stepped into the fourth tribulation of immortality, and he possesses numerous great fortunes. If he finds out that you're still alive, then you won't be far from death. Qi Yinfeng spoke resentfully. Bang! Mo Tianhe was furious, and he kicked Qi Yinfeng away, causing him to lie on the ground in a sorry state. You're about to die, yet you still don't repent. You're simply disappointing. Ha! The winner takes all. I wasn't able to defeat your profound Ask Sword School this time, but I won't be able to in the future. Qi Yinfeng sneered ferociously. Killing intent flashed in Mo Tianhe's eyes, but he was stopped by Lin Sun. He looked down at Qi Yinfeng and said, You're heartless, but I can't be unjust. Don't you hold the son of hell in high regard? Let me see how the son of hell will treat a loyal lackey like you if you don't have this cultivation. What are you going to do? Qi Yinfeng screamed. Bang! Lin Sun kicked Qi Yinfeng and crushed his Tao seed. In this way, Qi Yunfeng's cultivation was completely destroyed. Even if his primordial spirit could leave its shell and possess someone else's body, it would be difficult for him to seek immortality. All of a sudden, Qi Yinfeng seemed to have aged countless years. He was stunned, and it took him a long time to let out an extremely shrill roar. Lin Sun, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Don't forget that in addition to the son of hell, there's another ancient Buddha who regards you as a thorn in his side. His voice was hoarse, angry, and resentful. Bang! Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and Qi Yinfeng flew out directly and disappeared in the distant sky. Why didn't you kill him? Ji Xingyao couldn't help asking. Do you think the son of hell will still treat a useless man like before? It won't be long before this guy will taste the taste of living a life worse than death. Lin Sun said casually. His words made everyone present shudder with fear. Indeed, losing his cultivation in the upper 9 realms was definitely 10 times, or even 100 times more painful than killing Qi Yinfeng on the peak of Kongzhi Mountain in a magnificent hall. This time, it's all thanks to you, Brother Lin. Please accept my bow. Mo Tianhe stood up and bowed. Seeing this, the others also stood up and bowed. With Lin Sun's arrival, a dangerous predicament was simply and rudely resolved. How could these descendants of Xianwen Sword School not be grateful? You don't have to do this. Please take a seat. Lin Sun said hurriedly. When everyone was seated, he said, I'm here to inquire about something from you. Is it related to fellow practitioner Jean Dui? Ji Xingyao's eyes lit up. She guessed correctly. Lin Sun nodded with a smile. When he learned of your death, he left alone without hesitation. According to our speculation, he should have gone to find a trace of ancient Buddha. Ji Xingyao couldn't help but feel a little apologetic when she said this. It's also my fault that senior brother Mo and I didn't stop him in time. Lin Sun waved his hand and said, It's not your fault. I know old Toad's temper. If he wants to leave, none of you can stop him. But have you heard any news about him in the past 4 years? Ji Xingyao shook her head, and Mo Tianhe said abruptly, According to my judgment, fellow Taoist Jean should be fine. Because since Brother Lin vanished 4 years ago, Gu Fuzi seemed to have vanished into thin air as well. In the past 4 years, many people have been looking for ancient Buddha, but without exception, all of them have found nothing. Lin Sun was stunned. Ancient Buddha also disappeared? And have you seen the big black bird? Lin Sun asked again. You mean the bird that snatched the Ming child's refining pot of hell, Emperor? Yes. The bird's whereabouts are unpredictable. It has appeared several times in these years, and every time it appeared in some dangerous places of fortune. Ji Xingyao said quickly, but, as far as I know, Ming Child has taken back the refining pot of Hell Emperor from a bird. Lin Sun frowned. Even the big black bird couldn't keep the refining pot of Hell Emperor. In the following conversation, Lin Sun also learned some of the things that happened in the upper 9 realms in the past 4 years. For example, Laughing in the Heavens, Sword Devil Yi Chun, and other orthodoxies such as Golden Crow, Sea Spirit Clan, and Beast Spirit Mountain. For example, Yin Qingbai once appeared in the distant Fire Realm. For example, Yu Jiaming crossed the upper 9 realms with his sword to inquire about the trace of ancient Buddha. For example, Xiao Qinghe, the successor of Sun Moon Hall, acted alone to avenge Lin Sun. When Lin Sun learned these things, he couldn't help but feel touched and warm in his heart, but he couldn't help but worry about them. Lin Sun knew very well what kind of risks they would bear by doing so. In addition, Ji Xingyao also talked about some major events that happened in the upper 9 realms. For example, Yin Qingbai ranked first on the Tianjiao Golden List 3 years ago, and this record had been maintained until now, and no one had ever broken it. Even some busybodies directly praised Yun Qingbai as the first in the absolute peak territory. For example, after several reshuffles in the upper 9 realms, the strong who could survive had obtained a lot of benefits and opportunities in these years, and their strength had improved by leaps and bounds. In the first few years, the strong who entered the upper 9 realms competed for the sake of becoming a king. Being able to reach the Peerless King realm was already enough to run amok. But now, there were thousands of peerless kings who had stepped into the third tribulation of longevity, and existences at the level of Mingzi had already passed the fourth tribulation of longevity. When Lin Sun learned this, he also sighed with emotion in his heart. In just 4 years, so many changes had taken place. Batch after batch of peerless kings had advanced triumphantly on their respective paths. If this happened in the outside world, it would be absolutely unimaginable. But in the upper 9 realms where there were many opportunities and fortunes, it was actually not uncommon. This was almost the 5th year since the absolute peak territory came to the world. In about 4 years, everything would come to an end. It could be foreseen that in the following time, the competition would only become more and more cruel. Although Lin Sun had now stepped into the third tribulation of longevity, he didn't dare to slack off after learning this news. Cultivation was like sailing against the current. If you didn't move forward, you would fall back. He understood this truth very early on. Brother Lin, are you going to settle accounts with ancient Buddha? Mo Tianhe asked. Or to settle accounts with Mingzi? Ji Xingyao was also curious. Lin Sun shook his head. There's no need at all. When they know that I'm still alive, they will naturally take the initiative to find me. Everyone pondered for a moment and came to a realization. Indeed, at present, no one in the upper nine realms knew that Lin Sun was still alive, but it wouldn't be long before the news about Lin Sun's survival would sweep across. At that time, how could the experts who once had a grudge against Lin Sun, whether it was Mingzi, ancient Buddha, or others, sit still? For now, I want to stay here for the time being. I wonder if you are willing to take me in? Lin Sun asked. Of course. Mo Tiana laughed heartily. Ji Xingyao took a deep look at Lin Sun with a smile on her lips. She knew that the reason why Lin Sun stayed was that he was worried that the forces of the underworld would come again, so that the profound sword house would fall into trouble again. If he was in charge, it would be a deterrent that couldn't be ignored. This was the Lin Sun she knew. Even if he was helping others, he would never leave a trace. P.S. The third chapter will be sent as a supplement. Then he made a plan. If there was no accident, Goldfish would make up all the 6 chapters she owed within next week. Chapter 1267. From that day on, Lin Sun temporarily settled in Kongzhi Mountain. Qing Sang Peak. Green bamboos, ancient rocks, waterfalls, old vines, and clear streams were picturesque, just like a fairyland. The Kongzhi Mountain was one of the most famous blessed lands in the distant Fire Realm. Spirit veins gathered there, and it was a beautiful place. The dwelling place Ji Xingyao arranged for Lin Sun was a place where the original spirit of Kongzhi Mountain was rooted, which was of great benefit to cultivation. The bamboo forest was lush and green, and a stream gurgled through the bamboo forest, adding a touch of tranquility and vastness. Lin Sun sat on the bank of the stream in the bamboo forest, holding a palm-sized formation stone stained with blood on its surface. In the eyes of a King Realm strongman, this stone couldn't be seen through, but for spiritual tattooists, it was a treasure. Because of the extremely profound prohibition power involved, there was actually another world inside this stone. In the eyes of spiritual tattooists, this stone had another name, Tao, Prohibition Stone. At this time, Lin Sun was concentrating on this treasure. When he crossed the Boundary River for the first time and arrived at Green Flame City on the border of Dongxing Realm, Lin Sun accidentally got this treasure from stall selling treasures. But he had been busy these years, and this thing had been put in the wordless pagoda and almost forgotten. It was only when Lin Sun checked his treasures recently that he picked it up again. In addition to this strange Tao Prohibition Stone, Lin Sun also got a black cocoon from a dissected meteorite at the Stone Appraisal Convention, held in Green Flame City. In the cocoon, there was a silent larva of sky-splitting butterfly. Its aura was extremely strange and terrible, like a king from the depths of the abyss, which made people's hearts palpitate. At that time, this creature was mistakenly thought to have lost its vitality, which benefited Lin Sun. According to Little Silver, it was more difficult for the larva of sky-splitting butterfly to evolve than spirit-eating bugs, because it needed a unique cloud grain crystal to breed it. Cloud grain crystal, a priceless divine material born in the rules of space, had long been extinct in the ancient Desolation territory. Because of this, the cracked demonic butterfly's cocoon had always been like a stubborn stone, being placed in the wordless pagoda all these years to gather dust. Lin Sun had collected a lot of heavenly and earthly treasures since he started his cultivation, but he had never seen the cloud pattern crystal. Even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. However, according to Little Silver speculation not long ago, cloud pattern space crystals might exist in the upper 9 realms. If Lin Sun could find this thing, he wouldn't need to trouble him at all. Little Silver could help raise and take care of the demonic cracked butterfly's evolution. The bamboo forest was tranquil. As the mountain breeze blew, it produced a rustling sound that was like the sound of nature. Beside him, a clear stream flowed, tinkling. Casually sitting here would cause one to completely forget about the world. At this time, in Lin Sun's mind, there were a lot of pictures made up of spiritual tattoo formations, which were dense and vast like the sea. This was the spiritual rune inheritance hidden in the Tao restriction stone, Tao pattern quintessence. I have devoted my whole life to the study of spiritual tattoos. What I have learned is engraved here. I only hope that it will be passed on and I will have no regrets. Spiritual tattoos are the manifestation of Tao patterns. In ancient times, our ancestors observed the veins of all things in the world and understood the way of spiritual tattoos and traced back to their origin. All kinds of spiritual tattoos and formations are the veins of the Great Way. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and was a little surprised. He had learned spiritual tattoos from Master Lu since he was a child, and he had heard Master Lu say that all changes were the same. Spiritual tattoos were ever-changing and claimed to have infinite possibilities. But if one peeped into their true essence, he would find that they were nothing more than the veins of the Great Way. The exposition of spiritual tattoos in Tao pattern quintessence was exactly the same as Master Lu's. Therefore, Lin Sun looked forward to Tao pattern quintessence even more. Tao patterns, the origin of spiritual tattoos, are in harmony with the Great Way, such as wind, cloud, thunder, and lightning, yin and yang, and the 5 elements. They are as small as the leaves of plants, but they also have veins. They are as big as the stars in the universe, but they also follow the orbit. Therefore, there is no difference between high and low. They are all images of the Great Way and can deduce the truth of all things in the world. When we study Tao patterns, we can use them to control the power of heaven and earth with the help of spiritual tattoos. However, the Great Way is unpredictable, and Tao patterns are obscure and indescribable. Gradually, Lin Sun became more and more serious, and his mind became more and more focused. Soon, he was immersed in it. Rather than saying that the Tao rune quintessence was an inheritance to study spiritual runes, it would be better to say that it was a scripture of the Tao rune quintessence. An ordinary spiritual tattooist was bound to be disappointed because there was no specific method of spiritual tattoos in the scripture, so he couldn't copy and practice it. But for Lin Sun, Tao pattern quintessence was priceless. With his current attainments in spiritual tattoos, he might be able to control the royal forbidden formation with ease, but he couldn't go further. It was like a bottleneck, which made it difficult for him to break through. But the emergence of Tao pattern quintessence provided him with a possibility to make a breakthrough in spiritual tattoos. Now, Lin Sun was already a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos. If he went further, it would be a whole new realm. Tao pattern master. Tao pattern and spiritual tattoos were only one word apart, but they represented 2 completely different concepts. Anyone who could become a Tao pattern master had seen through the essence of spiritual tattoos and began to trace back to the origin to study Tao patterns. It could be said that such people had gone beyond the scope of spiritual tattoos and began to explore the essence and mystery of spiritual tattoos. Lin Sun hadn't met a Tao pattern master in all these years of cultivation. It could be imagined that at least in the ancient desolation realm, Tao pattern masters were absolutely rare. At this time, Lin Sun had made a judgment. The extraordinary person who wrote Tao pattern quintessence must be a Tao pattern master. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to have such a profound understanding. Writing a book was something that anyone with some knowledge could do. But if he could write a book into a scripture, he would be no different from becoming a sage. Although there was only one word in the scripture, it contained a great universe. Lin Sun had a hunch that if he could thoroughly understand Tao pattern quintessence, he could definitely break through a new level in spiritual tattoos. At that time, it should not be difficult to set up a formation to trap and kill the peerless figures who had passed the longevity test. Of course, Lin Sun had another consideration. It was impossible for him to stay in Kongzhi Mountain all the time to help Xianwen's sword house resolve the invasion of foreign enemies. But before he left, he could set up a restrictive formation that could intimidate the enemies of the Kongzhi Mountain. "What are you doing, Brother Lin?" On the main peak of Kongzhi Mountain, Mo Tianhe couldn't help asking. "Cultivating," Ji Xingyao said casually. Mo Tianhe was stunned for a moment, and then he praised, "Heaven rewards the diligent. Brother Lin, you must have a deep understanding of the meaning of cultivation. Compared with you, it's enough to make me feel ashamed." Ji Xingyao rolled her eyes and said, "Why didn't I see that Brother Mo has also learned to flatter and flatter?" Mo Tianhe laughed and didn't take it seriously. In the past, he might have been prejudiced against Lin Sun, but now he regarded Lin Sun as a friend, and some small grudges in the past had disappeared. Brother Imo, Lin Sun is staying in Kongsha Mountain. It can be foreseen that there will be many troubles in the following days. We can't be careless. Ji Xingyao reminded him. Imo Tianhe was shocked and nodded to show that he understood. After 4 years, Lin Sun came back alive. This news, like a hurricane, spread throughout the distant fire realm at an exaggerated speed and suddenly made the relatively quiet atmosphere explode. Demon Lin is still alive? How is this possible? Many people were confused and couldn't believe it. 4 years ago, all kinds of news about Lin Sun's death were overwhelming, and it caused a sensation in the whole Upper Nine realm. But now, there was news that Lin Sun came back to life, and came back with a strong momentum. No one could believe it for a moment. Impossible, this is absolutely false news. Many people questioned it and thought it was just a rumor. In any case, the news spread completely. The reason was nothing more than one word: fame. 4 years ago, Demon Lin's name was like the sun shining alone in this area. He was well known to the world. Both enemies and friends had to admit that he was powerful. In particular, what happened to him was like a legend. Although Lin Sun's name had gradually disappeared in people's eyes in the past 4 years, it was still unforgettable. Therefore, when the news came out that Lin Sun came back alive, it could be imagined how great the sensation it caused was. For a moment, the situation that had fallen into a short period of peace was completely broken with the news. Many forces were alarmed, and many strong people were in an uproar. It's true. On that day, the forces of the underworld besieged Kongsha Mountain, trying to force the Xianwen Sword House to surrender. But because of Lin Sun's appearance, the plot of the forces of the underworld was destroyed in one fell swoop. When this specific news came out, coupled with the places and deeds that could be used as reference, it immediately caused an uproar in the distant fire realm. Following that, more and more specific news spread. The forces of the underworld were all defeated. Among them, 3 divine generals died, 1 escaped, and the others were killed. The underworld was a behemoth in the current Upper Nine realm, and its rise was unstoppable. But now, all 4 of his immortal generals had been defeated, and this was astounding. Demon Lin has stepped into the 3rd retribution of longevity. When they heard this news, many large forces were restless and could not remain calm. After disappearing for 4 years, not only did Demon Lin come back to life, his combat strength was also incomparable to before. Countless angry roars sounded in the place where the forces of the underworld were entrenched. They wanted to immediately move out and kill Lin Sun. There was no problem with Lin Sun coming back alive, but his return was accompanied by a storm of blood that killed the strong people of the underworld. This was bound to be a great blow to the current power of the underworld. He's actually still alive. A scourge lives for 1,000 years? Now that this fellow has returned, it could be foreseen that the distant fire realm is destined to not be peaceful. At this point, everyone was sure that the news of Lin Sun being alive could not be false. Many people even began to speculate what kind of storm Lin Sun's appearance would cause. What was certain was that this storm would definitely not be small. P.S. Thank you WJH6999 and the other children for their tips and monthly tickets. Some children said that the first update last night had too few words, so it could not be considered a supplementary update. Chapter 1268. In the mountains and fields, Yu Jianming's chest was filled with joy. On the ground, several opponents had fallen to the ground with despair on their faces. Yu Jianming, a solitary swordsman, was so powerful that it made people's hearts tremble. He rose from obscurity and became famous in killing and bloodshed. Until now, in the Upper Nine realms, Yu Jianming had become a very famous swordsman. Anyone who made an enemy of him had all been turned into a pile of bones. However, to the astonishment of these desperate opponents, Yu Jianming suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, then put away his sword. Today, I'm in a good mood, so I'll spare you. Before his voice died away, he had disappeared, leaving a group of strong people looking at each other with lingering fear. It's a pity that for 4 years, I haven't found any clues about Goof Fosy for you. On a cliff, Yu Jianming stood and looked at the sea of clouds in the distance with a trace of regret in his heart. If I had known it, I wouldn't have overstepped my authority. Yi Chen murmured, but in his heart, he was indescribably happy. Lin Sun was still alive. Gu Fosy has been hiding for 4 years. If he knows you are alive, he will show up sooner or later. Laughing at the heavens, smiled brightly. He knew that with Lin Sun's character, he would definitely go to Gu Fosy to settle accounts. Even if others wanted to intervene, Lin Sun would not agree. Hey, junior brother Xiao, why are you willing to come back? Don't you want to meet Lin Sun? Mi Hengxin joked. Xiao Qing had touched his nose and then smiled. As long as I know he is alive, it doesn't matter whether I meet him or not. Mi Hengxin raised his thumb and said, when the matter is done, leave in a huff. Xiao Qinghe smiled bitterly, but he also saw that Mi Hengxin seemed to be in a good mood after learning that Lin Sun was still alive. Mi Hengxin rarely joked with him like this before. It's been 4 years. The situation has changed. Even if Lin Sun is alive, he can only behave with his tail between his legs. Similarly, some people sneered and were not optimistic about Lin Sun. Lin Sun is like a flood dragon. If he comes out, he will definitely stir up trouble. Those who have a grudge against him are bound to take action. Someone analyzed the situation. Demon God Lin's reputation was built from his battles. It was common knowledge that he had many enemies. For example, Ming Child, Gu Fuzi, Hidden Void Mountain. Go and investigate Lin Sun's movements. As the news of Lin Sun's survival spread, many forces couldn't sit still and sent their forces to investigate the specific movements of Lin Sun. Senior Sister Ji, Senior Brother Mo, the situation doesn't look good. Currently, many experts from various forces have appeared near our Kongzhi Mountain. A disciple of the profound Inquiry Sword School reported with a worried expression on his face. They're just a bunch of spies. Don't bother with them. Ji Xingyao appeared very calm. The moment Lin Sun chose to stay on Kongzhi Mountain, she'd expected such a scene to occur. After all, he'd return alive. Junior Sister Ji is right. As long as they don't provoke us, we don't have to pay attention to them. However, it's best that we don't go out in the near future to avoid any mishaps. Emotina said solemnly. Presently, the gazes of the entire distant fire territory had started to focus on Kongzhi Mountain, and it could be foreseen that such a situation would continue to ferment in the near future. Emotina couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This is the power of fame. Every single move of yours is watched from all directions, and it's imperceptibly stirring up a storm. Flattery again. Ji Xingyao glanced sideways at him. Mo Tianhe was speechless. At this moment, Kongzhi Mountain was like the eye of a storm. It seemed calm, but a storm was brewing. On Kongzhi Mountain, even though Ji Xingyao and Mo Tianhe were calm, they had no choice but to carefully arrange all defensive measures. For example, forbidding the disciples of the sect from going out. For example, making preparations to welcome the storm. As time passed, more and more cultivators gathered outside Kongzhi Mountain, and all of them were watching nervously. Demonic God Lin's return this time annihilated a force sent by the underworld. I can foresee that the underworld will definitely counterattack. Exactly. If they admit defeat just like that, then not only will the reputation of the underworld plummet, even the Nether Child will be seen as not daring to go against demonic God Lin. Just wait. When the forces of the underworld make a comeback, we'll be able to determine exactly how powerful Lin Sun is. Such discussions continue to take place. No one could ignore demonic God Lin's reappearance. This atmosphere of an impending storm lasted for several days. But what was strange was that not only did Lin Sun not appear from Kongzhi Mountain, but even the experts of the forces of the underworld did not come. For a time, many experts were shocked and bewildered. In the bamboo forest on Kongzhi Mountain, Lin Sun scooped up a handful of water from a stream, which turned into sparkling and resplendent water droplets. With a thought from Lin Sun, these water droplets suddenly turned into threads of water, which formed a well-proportioned and mysterious formation diagram in the void. Buzz! As soon as the formation was formed, It emitted a strange fluctuation, and the dense spiritual energy in the entire bamboo forest gathered from all directions. More and more spiritual energy gathered, and it turned into spiritual liquid in the formation diagram, which flowed down like a small waterfall. Suddenly, there was a gasp in the distance. No one knew when, but Mo Tianhe had arrived here and witnessed this scene. This caused him to be shocked. The means of spiritual tattooists had always been known for their ingenuity, which was mysterious and unpredictable. But everyone knew that if a spiritual tattooist wanted to set up a formation, he had to rely on tools such as formation plates, formation flags, formation runes, and so on. But now, Lin Sun casually turned a handful of water into a spirit-gathering formation, which absorbed the spiritual energy of this world. How could Mo Tianhe not be shocked by such a means? A title came to his mind involuntarily. Taoist Tattooist? Splash, the formation diagram dissipated and turned into water again, falling into the stream. Brother Lin, is this the means of a Taoist tattooist? Mo Tianhe couldn't help asking. Lin Sun shook his head. It's not good enough. A real Taoist tattooist could set up a royal forbidden formation by raising his hand, which contained the magical power of the Great Way. But Lin Sun could only set up some ordinary spiritual formations, which were far from being able to set up a royal forbidden formation. But this was already a good start. And this was also the benefit that Lin Sun gained from comprehending the understanding of Taoist tattoos these days. Brother Mo, is there anything I can help you with? Lin Sun stood up from the stream and asked. The situation has been a bit abnormal recently. Mo Tianhe frowned and told Lin Sun all the things that had happened these days. Do you think Mingzi will be too afraid to come? Lin Sun asked. Mo Tianhe shook his head. What a joke. The underworld was famous in the upper 9 regions. How could Mingzi let it go after suffering such a big loss in Lin Sun's hands? This proves that the Dark Child is either delayed by some important matter, or he's preparing a surefire method to deal with me. Lin Sun said casually. Lin Sun was not afraid of Mingzi at all. The reason why he chose to stay here was that he wanted Old Toad, the big blackbird, Alu, Yu Jiaming, and Xiao Qinghe to know where he was. These days, Lin Sun gradually learned that laughing at the heavens, Yechen, and the others were relieved after learning that he was still alive. But to Lin Sun's surprise, there was no news from Old Toad and the big blackbird. This was what worried him. Lin Sun, someone came and asked you to go out and meet him. Ji Xingyao hurried over from a distance with a strange look on her face. Who? Yuling Kong. Ji Xingyao spat out 3 words. Lin Sun immediately understood why Ji Xingyao's expression was so strange. If he remembered correctly, Yuling Kong, a peerless figure from the pure land of longevity in the Shaoxian world, had been in love with Ji Xingyao for a long time. What is he doing here? Is he going to take revenge? Lin Sun sneered. It wasn't that he looked down on Yuling Kong, but he had already left Yuling Kong behind in the competition of the junior giants. I don't know. Ji Xingyao curled her lips. Of course, she knew that Yuling Kong had always been in love with her. Unfortunately, she had never had a good impression of Yuling Kong. As a matter of fact, it was in order to avoid Yuling Kong that she met Lin Sun in the Pine Mist martial arts field by chance. Then I'll go and meet this old friend. Lin Sun made a decision after thinking for a while. Outside the Kongja Mountain, Yuling Kong stood there, wearing a feather robe, a high crown, and a jade belt around his waist. He looked outstanding. He was waiting quietly with mixed feelings. This time, he had to come. In the distance, many people were paying attention to all this. They were a little surprised. They didn't expect that Yuling Kong jumped out first before the underworld earth came. He also came to seek revenge on Demon God Lin. In the past, Yuling Kong was also a rising star of the current generation. He was famous all over the world. Not only was he from a noble family, but his talent was also amazing. But now, with the passage of time, although he was still dazzling, he was still inferior to Yin Zhanxiu, Wang Xuanyu, Yi Mok, and Mi Hongjin. Not to mention compared with Demon God Lin. But Yuling Kong was here. What was he here for? Everyone was puzzled. He came out. Suddenly, someone cried out. At this time, Yuling Kong suddenly raised his head and saw a handsome figure coming out of the mountain gate. He was dressed in a white robe, and his black hair was fluttering. His appearance was so familiar that Kong couldn't help but roll his heart. However, when he thought of the purpose of this trip, his state of mind became firm again. It's really Demon God Lin. He's really still alive. In the distance, the strong people who were scattered and observing in the dark were all restless. Although all kinds of news had proved that Lin Sun was still alive, it was the first time they saw Lin Sun with their own eyes. For a moment, all eyes fell on Lin Sun with different expressions. Demon God Lin. For 4 years, when everyone thought this legendary figure fell like a comet, he returned to people's sight in a strong manner, stepping on the dead bodies of the strong people of the underworld. Chapter 1269. Lin Sun was keenly aware that hundreds of eyes in the nearby area fell on him from different directions. But he didn't care. Why are you looking for me? Lin Sun looked at Kong. After not seeing her for many years, she had already stepped into the second tribulation of longevity realm. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel somewhat wistful. Amongst all the experts that had participated in the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival all those years ago, Kong was an existence that no one could overlook. On the ranking of minor giants, Kong was in the top 10, but he was no longer as dazzling as before. Had he become weaker? No. In the entire world, there were many people who were more dazzling than Kong. At this moment, Kong's expression was very calm. He said, I am here because I want to fight against you and break the barrier in my heart. I hope you can fulfill my wish. There was a burst of laughter in the distance. Everyone was able to discern that Kong's challenge seemed to be overestimating his ability, and they even wondered if he was an idiot. Wasn't he purely looking for a beating? Even Ji Xingyao couldn't help but be stunned, and a wisp of a complicated expression flashed between her brows. Back then, Kong's elegance was unparalleled. Yet now, because of a single challenge, he was ridiculed by others. How could such a change not cause others to sigh with emotion? Aren't you worried that I'll kill you? Lin Sun asked. If I die in battle, I will have no regrets. Kong seemed as if she didn't notice the laughter in the surroundings, and she said calmly, Since I lost at your hands during the Tao Lantern discussion, a barrier has already appeared in my heart. Up until now, this barrier is like a malignant tumor, and if I don't eliminate it, it will surely obstruct my path towards the Tao. Lin Sun said, I see. I hope you can fulfill my wish. Kong put on a solemn expression and cupped his fists. He had changed. He didn't have that arrogant and disdainful attitude from before, and he had become reserved and solemn, like a heavy sword without a sharp edge. He was simply like a completely different person from before. It should be noted that Lin Sun had every reason to kill him in the past. However, he was not afraid and came to fight alone. Gazing at Kong for a moment, Lin Sun finally nodded. Come with me. He turned around and returned to Kongja Mountain. Kong was taken aback, but she didn't back off. She followed him. Everyone in the distance looked at each other. Did Demon God Lin agree to accept Kong's challenge? 15 minutes later, on Green Mulberry Peak, Kong was crushed to the ground. He was covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. But to his surprise, Lin Sun didn't kill him. Have you broken your inner demons? Lin Sun asked. Kong wiped the blood off the corner of her lips. Enduring the pain all over her body, she stood up with difficulty and said, It will be cured in less than 3 days. There was an unprecedented sense of ease in his voice. No one knew what sort of pain he'd suffered in these past few years, because the crushing defeat at that time was like a shadow that wore down his Tao heart and will. Even though he had become a top cultivator at the second tribulation of the longevity realm, Kong knew that his state of mind was still unstable. There was a possibility of going berserk at any time. Rather than dying from the invasion of the heart demon, it was better to have a good battle and completely end this karma. Thus he came. At this moment, he was defeated, but to him, it was like he'd escaped from a shackle, and he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. You can leave. Lin Sun glanced at him. Kong was stunned. With a complicated expression, he couldn't help asking why. Lin Sun said, The grudge between you and me arose from fighting for opportunities. Besides, you're the one who failed every time. Since you chose to end it today, why should I haggle over every ounce and take your life? It's unnecessary. It was unnecessary. That was Lin Sun's idea. Yulin Kong fell silent. After a long time, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your help." Lin Sun also cupped his hands and didn't say anything more. "If you want to find Gufozi, maybe you could go to the Buddha land to have a look." Before leaving, Yulin Kong suddenly said. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and remembered the name. When Yulin Kong left, his clothes were stained with blood, and he looked extremely embarrassed. This scene was witnessed by countless practitioners. However, no one had expected that Demon Lin, who was famous for his ferocity, would let Yulin Kong go. Aren't you worried that after he gets rid of the inner demons, his cultivation will advance by leaps and bounds, and he will come to you for revenge? Ji Xingyao was also puzzled. As long as I'm stronger than him, why should I be afraid of revenge? Lin Sun said casually. The enemy's threat would only be a spur for Lin Sun to not be complacent and slack off. Of course, according to his judgment, it was impossible for Yulin Kong to have the idea of revenge in the future, because Yulin Kong had changed. People would change. Like Yin Feng, like Yulin Kong. It was just that their changes were different. In fact, Lin Sun had also changed over the years. When he was young, he bore the burdens. Although he was hot-blooded and unscrupulous, all his purpose was to be good to himself. Now, after experiencing so many hardships and growth, he was different from when he was young. His mentality and perspective were also different. "Miss G, do you know where the Buddha land is?" Lin Sun asked. "The Buddha land? It's a very famous forbidden area in Jin Mountain territory. It's extremely strange and ominous. Someone once saw a Buddha tower made of countless bones there. It's 3,000 stories high. Every night, there will be a horrible and strange phenomenon." Ji Xingyao said quickly. "Over the years, many strong people have gone there to explore, but they either died or came back empty-handed." Lin Sun nodded and thought that if Gu Fozi was hiding there, it would be difficult to find him. "Why are you interested in that place?" Ji Xingyao asked curiously. "Not for the time being." Lin Sun shook his head. He needed to wait for a while to see if he could get any news about Old Toad, the big blackbird, and Alu. At the same time, he needed to get rid of some enemies first. For example, Mingzi. In fact, Lin Sun had another idea deep in his heart. How would Yun Qingbai feel when he learned that he was still alive? Would he dare to come and fight with him? Of course, even if Yun Qingbai didn't come in the end, Lin Sun would go to him. Yunluo Mountain, the place where the forces of the underworld occupied. Zhang Yuan frowned, feeling a little anxious. There was a black underworld hall not far away from him. It was the place where Mingzi cultivated in seclusion. A few days ago, Si Yunfeng, Yu Liangyin, Tuo Teng, and the others had gone to Kongsha Mountain to force the profound sword school to submit. But because of Lin Sun's appearance, they were almost wiped out. If Zhang Yuan hadn't reacted quickly and escaped decisively, he would have been doomed. At this moment, when he thought of the momentum that Lin Sun had displayed that day, Zhang Yuan felt a chill in his heart. Therefore, as soon as he returned, he waited here with the intention of reporting this news to the Mingzi. Unfortunately, Mingzi was in seclusion. Over the past few days, Zhang Yuan could clearly feel that the reputation of the forces of the underworld had suffered an unprecedented blow after their failure this time. Even the outside world was waiting to see the underworld become a joke. If they didn't take any concrete action, the outside world would only think that the rise of the underworld had come to a premature end. When that time came, what would the forces that had pledged allegiance to the underworld think? Why hasn't Lord Mingzi appeared yet? Si Yinfeng paced back and forth angrily. Zhang Yuan glanced coldly at Si Yinfeng. He's just a piece of trash. Does he really think that Mingzi will treat him like before? What are you looking at? Si Yinfeng was furious. My cultivation has been crippled, and you're not much better off. Aren't you embarrassing yourself by retreating without a fight? If you dare say another word, I'll kill you right away. Zhang Yuan spoke coldly. Her words caused Si Yunfeng's face to turn pale, and his heart was filled with indescribable anger and grievance. But in the end, he shut his mouth. Zhang Yuan grunted coldly, and deep disdain flashed through her eyes. At this moment, Si Yunfeng suddenly felt an indescribable sense of defeat and dejection. In the past, he was so glorious, but now he'd actually fallen to a state where he had to rely on others to protect his life. This difference caused him to be on the verge of collapse. Regret? His intestines were green with regret. Unfortunately, it was too late for regret. At this moment, the closed door of the underworld hall, not far away, suddenly opened, and an extremely dignified and slender figure bathed in dim Taoist light stepped out. As he strode forward, the heavens and earth darkened, and a suffocating pressure spread out. Mingzi had broken out of seclusion. Lin Sun is still alive? Good, good, good. I've always regretted the enmity of those years. Today, my wish can finally be fulfilled. When Mingzi learned from Zhang Yuan what had happened in Kongsha Mountain, he exuded a terrifying and boundless killing intent. As for how many people were killed by Lin Sun in this action, Mingzi didn't care at all. He was confident that as long as he was there, the rise of the underworld was destined to be unstoppable. As for the subordinates he lost, he could just replenish them in the future. Your Excellency, please help me. Si Yunfeng prostrated on the ground, weeping bitterly. Now, his only hope was Mingzi. Mingzi suddenly frowned, and a touch of annoyance emerged in his heart. But he still said, "Don't worry. Since you're the general of the underworld, I won't let you be disabled like this. In the future, I'll help you find a body and possess it with a secret method. It'll be enough for you to recover your combat strength." This was a means to buy people's hearts. Even though he couldn't wait to kick Si Yunfeng away, he couldn't do so. Otherwise, it would inevitably disappoint those strong people who had pledged allegiance to him. If the people's hearts were scattered, it would be difficult to lead the team. "Thank you, Your Excellency." Si Yunfeng was overjoyed and grateful. Zhang Yuan sneered in her heart. The possession was successful, but how could it be so easy to integrate the Tao seed and Taoism of others? Even if he recovered his combat strength, it was destined that it would be difficult for him to set foot in a higher realm in the future. Of course, Si Yunfeng also understood this, but he didn't care. He had already experienced the feeling of being a waste, and he didn't want to be tortured like this anymore. "Zhang Yuan, I'll give you 3 days to gather people. 3 days later, go with me to Kongsha Mountain to kill Lin Sun and wash Xianwen's sword house with blood." Mingzi put his hands behind his back, and his eyes were dim. Around him, the boiling killing intent was like a surging flame, extremely frightening. Chapter 1270. 3 days from now, Ming Hun would lead the experts of the underworld to slaughter Lin Sun and bathe the profound Inquisition sword house in blood. On that very day, this news swept out like a storm, and it caused an uproar and exclamations of surprise. After so many days, has Ming Hun finally decided to attack? Let's go take a look. Ming Hun possesses the combat strength of the fourth tribulation of Longevity Realm. Although he hasn't been tested, it shouldn't be difficult for him to rank in the top 30 with his strength. As for exactly how strong he is, it'll naturally be obvious after this battle with Demon Godland. Some top figures couldn't sit still any longer, and they rushed towards Kongsha Mountain from various places. For a time, the number of cultivators in the vicinity of Kongsha Mountain had obviously increased explosively. "What's that?" someone exclaimed as he saw a golden-winged rock soar into the sky. Its wings cast a shadow that covered the mountain range, and it was coiled with dazzling golden light. Swoosh! When the golden-winged rock landed on the ground, it had transformed into a young man with an ordinary appearance. Only his eyes were dazzling golden. Young golden-winged rock king. Many people gasped. Just like Ming Hun, this young golden-winged rock king was an ancient freak that had appeared out of nowhere in the absolute nothingness domain, and his combat strength was peerlessly formidable. However, he kept an extremely low profile, and he was elusive like a dragon. But now, he had come to Kongsha Mountain as well. Bang! An immortal phoenix let out a clear cry. When its wings flashed through the sky, Even space collapsed and rumbled like thunderclaps. As soon as it appeared, a gorgeous and pure rain of light sprayed down, and it transformed into a woman with a tranquil and otherworldly appearance. A descendant of the immortal phoenix lineage, the heir of Mishra Palace, Lorga. This was yet another incomparably dazzling heaven's proud daughter. Haha, it's really bustling today. Along with a roar of laughter, a figure tore through the sky on an azure ray of sword light. It was a tall and slender man. He wore a black robe, had snow-white hair, and a handsome face that seemed as if it had been carved by a knife. A wave of restlessness arose in the surroundings as they recognized this person as the heir of the Origin sect, Yimok. These scenes played out successively in the following period of time, and it caused the nearby cultivators to be dazzled and dizzy. In the past, it was difficult to even see a single dazzling figure. Yet now, they actually came one after another. Who had ever seen such a grand occasion? This battle, no matter who wins or loses, is destined to be the center of attention and cause a sensation in the entire Upper Nine realms. Everyone had a feeling that when the Nether Child arrived with his army, the curtains to an unparalleled battle would be drawn. However, most people were worried about Lin's son. Everyone knew that Mingzi had already stepped into the fourth tribulation of Longevity Realm. Putting everything else aside, just his cultivation alone was enough to suppress Lin's son. Under such circumstances, did Lin dare to accept the challenge? Of course, everyone knew that whether Lin's son dared to fight or not, Ming Child was bound to kill him. During this period of time, the Upper Nine Realms has been in a relatively quiet situation. Who would have thought that Lin's son would come back alive and set off waves again? He is really a demon-like figure. Many people sighed with emotion. The situation in the outside world changed. On Kongja Mountain, all the disciples of the Profound Pursuit Sword School had heavy thoughts in their hearts, and they had solemn expressions on their faces. The army led by the Nether Child was about to invade. How could they not be nervous? But to Ji Xingyao and Mo Tian's surprise, in such a tense situation, Lin's son strolled up and down Kongja Mountain as if nothing had happened. Sometimes he picked a few wildflowers, and sometimes he waved his sleeves to uproot ancient trees and move them to other places. Sometimes he stretched out his hand and grabbed a large piece of cloud, covering the rocks and ancient rocks. From time to time, he would dig a hole in the depths of the cave with clanking sounds. In a short period of 2 days, the originally beautiful and secluded Kongja Mountain had changed completely, and it was in a state of disorder. Brother Lin, if nothing unexpected happens, the army of the underworld will come under the leadership of the Nether Child tomorrow. What do you think we should do? Mo Tianha said worriedly. This was the 6th time he had come to see Lin's son. Didn't I say that you don't need to do anything? Just stay on the mountain and watch the show. As Lin's son spoke, he grabbed a basin-sized lapis lazuli and inserted it into a newly dug rock crack. He looked leisurely and leisurely, which made Mo Tianha smile bitterly. Brother Lin, it's time for you to tell me what you're planning, isn't it? You'll know when you see it. Lin's son showed a secretive smile. In the end, Mo Tianha sighed and turned away. Although Lin's son said that they should just sit and watch, how could they sit still? Now, many powerful figures gathered near Kongja Mountain. It could be said that undercurrents were surging and a storm was coming. No one could stay calm when they saw such a scene. What did he say? In the hall, Ji Xingyao asked. He told us to watch the show without doing anything. Mo Tianha felt a headache. Then we'll just watch the show. Ji Xingyao seemed to be relieved and relaxed. She said slowly, You don't know Lin's son, but I do. Why is this guy regarded as a devil? It's simple. In one word, he can do what others can't. But that's the army of the underworld, and the children of the underworld are coming in person. Mo Tianha frowned. He trusted Lin's son's ability, but the seriousness of the situation made him worried. Ji Xingyao smiled and said no more. Only those who knew Lin Sun's past would know that Lin Sun had experienced many dangerous situations like this in the past, but he was still alive and well. This time, could Lin Sun create another miracle that ordinary people couldn't? Ji Xingyao was not sure, but she would rather believe that Lin Sun could do it. Rumble, on the third day, heaven and earth trembled violently. A thunderous roar sounded from a very far place, which made the wind and clouds change color and the earth tremble. It was like a torrent of thousands of troops and horses sweeping over the world. They're coming. In an instant, all the people who had been waiting near Kongzhi Mountain were alarmed and released their divine senses to spread out. In the distance, ferocious birds flashed through the sky, ferocious beasts galloped, and cultivators surged over in a formidable array like a tide. One could vaguely see that the sky above the army was surging with baleful aura, and it transformed into various terrifying phenomena that caused the heavens and the earth to dim. A shapeless killing intent swept over in all directions. Instantly, the expressions of many people changed, and their hearts trembled. From afar, the army of the underworld consisted of at least 1,000 people, and the weakest was at the King Realm. Moreover, peak King Realm cultivators were common. Someone sneered, "The underworld has annexed dozens of forces of various sizes in the past few years. Isn't it normal for them to possess such strength?" Unfortunately, in the end, they're just a motley crew. If the son of hell is killed, the forces of the underworld will definitely scatter. Many people agreed in their hearts. Although the rise of the underworld was shocking, it wasn't a monolithic force, and it was formed by cultivators from different forces. Once something happened to the son of hell, these forces that had submitted to the underworld would definitely collapse. However, it was too early to speak of all of this now. Regardless of whether they admitted it or not, the forces of the underworld were like the sun in the midday sky right now. He really does possess extraordinary natural talent, and he innately possesses great karmic luck. At the same time, the gazes of some top-rate figures had locked onto the person in the lead of the underworld army. It was the son of hell. His figure was extremely slender and dignified. He wore a black robe with wide sleeves, had a cold and proud expression, eyes that were deep like hell, and his entire body was covered in strands of an obscure and cold glow. Even though he was just a single person, he possessed an arrogant aura that shook the world. In an instant, he'd become the center of attention. The army followed behind him, and their imposing aura shot into the sky, causing his imposing aura to seem even more extraordinary. The crowd in the vicinity of Void Hibernation Mountain automatically moved aside, and they didn't dare obstruct the army at all. In the end, the underworld army stopped before Void Hibernation Mountain. The atmosphere here became peerlessly murderous. The originally clear sky had become dim at this moment, and it was filled with surging baleful energy. If it was an expert below the King Realm, then that expert wouldn't dare stand here at all. Merely the terrifying pressure emanated by the army was sufficient to crush them into pieces. Today, my underworld intends to kill Lin Sun here and wash Void Hibernation Mountain with blood. It's best for unrelated people to stand further away. Amidst the silence, the son of hell's voice was low and rumbled like a thunderclap. The hearts of many cultivators constricted, and they instinctively moved a little further away. On the other hand, figures like the young Ra King and Yi Mo had their own means to rely on, so they wouldn't be deterred by a single sentence. I know that all of you've come to watch the show. However, let me warn you beforehand. Anyone who dares to interfere in the battle later will be a mortal enemy of my underworld, and they'll be killed without mercy. The son of hell's gaze swept through the surroundings with a cold expression. He naturally noticed that there was no lack of top-rate and ruthless figures here, and that was why he'd warned them. Fight quickly. Don't waste everyone's time. Suddenly, an impatient voice resounded. Everyone was shocked, and they raised their heads to look over. After that, they came to a sudden understanding because it was the young Rock King who'd spoken. The son of hell's underworld glanced at the young Rock King and didn't say anything. After that, he strode forward with his hands behind his back, and his eyes suddenly looked towards Void Hibernation Mountain in the distance, while a loud shout came from his mouth. "Lin Sun, get the fuck out here and die." His voice shook the 9 heavens and the surroundings. For a time, the heavens and the earth were filled with surging echoes. The piercingly cold, killing intent seemed to be material, and it caused the void to collapse while the nearby rocks and plants were instantly crushed into powder. All the experts looked towards Void Hibernation Mountain in unison. Listen to me. All of you stay here and don't step out of the mountain no matter what. On Void Hibernation Mountain, Lin Sun instructed seriously. Ji Xingyao, Mo, Tianhe, and all the other disciples of the profound Ask Sword School had worried expressions on their faces. The forces of the underworld seemed to have turned out in full force this time, and the situation was even more dangerous than they'd expected. This caused Ji Xingyao to lose her composure. But in the end, under Lin Sun's firm and resolute attitude, they agreed in unison. Don't worry. No matter how powerful the forces of the underworld are, they're just a group of old demons and clowns that can't withstand a single blow. Lin Sun sneered, and then he turned around and soared into the sky. Right at this moment, the son of hell's peerlessly icy cold voice resounded through the heavens and the earth like thunder. When compared to what Lin Sun had said just now, Ji Xingyao and the others were agitated, and they couldn't help but clench their fists tightly. Chapter 1271. Under the gaze of countless people, Lin Sun walked out of the gate of Kongja Mountain alone. Suddenly, some strong people who had just arrived in the last 3 days were restless. It was really Demon Lin. Was he going to fight alone? Demon Lin, Yi Moham murmured in his heart. His eyes were like lightning, staring at Lin Sun. He had heard a lot of rumors about Lin Sun before, but this was the first time he saw Lin Sun with his own eyes. After looking at Lin Sun for a while, he nodded to himself. Lin Sun had a kind of momentum that could only be honed by killing for a long time, which made him feel that he was a kindred spirit. I haven't seen you for many years. Loka was in a trance. She had met Lin Sun several times and got along well with him. Before she came here this time, she had made up her mind that if Lin Sun met with an accident, she wouldn't mind offending Mingzi. Golden-winged Rock King sneered and seemed to be a little disappointed. He shook his head and said, I thought you were a fierce man with 3 heads and 6 arms, but I didn't expect you to be so weak. In his perception, Lin Sun's breath was actually very strong, but it was a little worse than what he had imagined. In addition, there were many discussions in the field. They were all speculating whether Lin Sun was sure to win this time, or he had no other choice. Are you going to die alone? In the void, Mingzi's eyes were like lightning, and his voice was cold. He was tall and slender, surrounded by wisps of obscure and cold Taoist light. Standing there, he was like a god of the underworld with an extremely terrifying momentum. Yes, I can send you to die alone. Lin Sun nodded with a calm look. He stood there, floating in the air, without any arrogance or disdain. This was related to his cultivation path. When he was restrained, his body and mind were as firm as a rock, as tranquil as a calm lake, with an air of transcendence. But once it broke out, it would be earth-shattering like an immortal sword breaking through the sky. Ho-ho, you joined hands with that bird and took my treasure by surprise, which made me hate you to this day. Today, it's time to put an end to it. Mingzi chuckled, with deep hatred and killing intent in his eyes. When I kill you, Kongja Mountain will be turned into a wasteland and covered with blood. Lin Sun answered, It depends on whether you have the ability. Sir, please use your thunderous methods to kill this fiend as soon as possible. A demon god Lin who has already become a thing of the past doesn't have the right to fight with you. Sir, why don't I take action and kill this brat? Sir, kill him. The experts of the underworld earth shouted, killing intent surging. They had incomparable confidence in the underworld child. In their eyes, the underworld child was an existence similar to the child of heaven. Killing Lin Sun was only a matter of time. On Mount Kongja, Ji Xingyao and the others were watching with nervous expressions, and the space between their brows was filled with worry. Could Lin Sun really make it? Whoosh! As Ming Child's eyes opened and closed, 2 beams of cyan light burst out and suddenly turned into a pair of cyan swords. The swords crisscrossed in the void and slashed at Lin Sun with a clanging sound. Everyone was alarmed. A great battle was about to break out at this moment. He merely raised his eyes, yet such a terrifying phenomenon appeared. divine swords crisscrossed, and they contained terrifying destructive power that was shocking to the extreme. "Underworld light eyes," someone exclaimed. This was an innate and extraordinary talent. Anyone who possessed it would be a genius that inherited the heavenly fate. Many people were already aware that demon god Lin had encountered an extremely terrifying opponent this time. Moo! It was as if a true dragon's roar resounded in the void, causing everyone's soul to tremble and their blood to boil. A nice hornless dragon transformed into a true dragon beneath Lin Sun's feet. It soared into the sky and emitted a fierce dragon's might and light that obliterated the pair of divine swords. It continued charging at the underworld child. Bang! Strands of obscure and cold light of the Tao floated up into appearance in front of the nether child, and they condensed into a precious rock that was inscribed with the ancient characters 3 lives. It instantly crushed the true dragon that pounced over, causing a rain of light to explode. "Sir, there's no need to hold back. Kill him." The experts of the underworld all shouted. It was as if they were the ones fighting on the battlefield. They were completely immersed in it, and they looked hot-blooded. The nearby people's emotions were stirred up as well. They held their breaths and watched nervously. After disappearing for 4 years, you were able to step into the 3rd tribulation of longevity. It seems like you've obtained quite a lot of opportunities. However, in my eyes, it's still not enough. The underworld child circulated his cultivation, and his figure swept through the air. He was like an attack from the god of the underworld. With a monstrous cold aura, he swooped down towards Lin Sun with unparalleled divine might. At this moment, the world returned to silence. Everyone shut their mouths, and the clamor in the field disappeared. Everyone's attention was focused on the battlefield. The underworld child attacked, displaying unparalleled divine might. His demeanor caused everything in the world to dim in comparison. It was enough to shake mountains and rivers. On the other side, Lin Sun had already attacked. Originally, his aura was ethereal and otherworldly, but the moment he attacked, he was like a true dragon that had come out of its abyss from hibernation. His entire body rumbled, and he drove the momentum of the world with boundless Tao light. Rumble. The two collided. It was like the sun and moon were clashing, like a battle between gods and demons. The void within 1,000 feet instantly collapsed and exploded. There was resplendent Tao light everywhere, and there was raging killing intent everywhere. It swept through the universe like it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Many experts cried out in alarm and retreated in panic. They felt a piercing pain in their eyes because the collision this time was too shocking and beyond imagination. The underworld child's cold Tao light was like purgatory, and it slaughtered the universe. On the other hand, Lin Sun's strength was like a true dragon that had come out of its abyss, and it roared proudly through the heavens and the earth. One was like a god of the underworld, and the other was like a demon. They fought in the void, causing numerous terrifying phenomena to appear, and the sound of the Tao shook without end. Bang! After an earth-shattering bang, the two separated, and they each stood in a different direction. Their auras were even more blazing and ferocious. A tie? The first collision caused everyone to feel dizzy, and their hearts shook. Clang! 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 Along with an ear-piercing sound, 9 bronze spears appeared behind the underworld child. All of them were ancient and heavy, and they were dyed bright red. The aura they emitted was filled with the aura of death and was hazy. It caused one's scalp to go numb just from looking at it from afar. There was no doubt that this set of spears had a shocking origin. At the same time, 9 tribulations that seemed as if they were cast from divine gold appeared around Lin Sun's body. They lined up together and attacked with a bang. Boom! In an instant, the spears weaved in the void. The dragon power surged, and the Tao light erupted. One could vaguely see the Ashura of the underworld holding the spears and terrifying ancient fierce beasts such as the ice dragon, Swanni, and Bashya appearing. There is the sound of the underworld like thunder, the roar of the dragon, and the vision of mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and a rain of blood. Between the two, all kinds of forces collided, and the power of law roared like a tide. So strong. Is this the real battle between giants? Many people's expressions changed, and their souls trembled. Just looking at it from a distance made their hair stand on end, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. If they were in it, they would probably be killed in an instant. The expressions of top figures, such as the young golden-winged rock king and Yi Mo, also became serious, and they were fully focused. Such a duel, even in the upper 9 realms, could be said to be unparalleled and rare. It was too rare. In the void, one person was bathed in the light of the underworld, like a god of the underworld coming out of purgatory. The other person was like a demon, running amok and murderous. The two clashed fiercely, and in the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged more than 100 blows. The battle was so grand that it attracted the attention of everyone present. One had to admit that the underworld child was so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. He was far from what he was 4 years ago. But at the same time, the battle strength that Lin Sun displayed also caused countless people to look at him and be moved. After disappearing for 4 years, he was able to compete with the underworld child with the cultivation of the third tribulation of the longevity realm. This in itself was unbelievable. Every inch of Lin Sun's skin was gushing with dazzling Tao light. In the end, his entire body was like a chaotic furnace, burning fiercely with shocking destructive power. The two fought from the sky to the ground. They fought fiercely, and blood spilled from time to time. This was the most powerful opponent that Lin Sun had encountered since he stepped into the third tribulation of the longevity realm. He did not dare to let his guard down. Even so, he was injured in the battle, especially the 9 spears in the hands of the underworld child. They could be called divine weapons. They were incomparably sharp, and every time they attacked, the spears would explode into powder. If it were any other powerhouse, they would be killed immediately. Everyone was dumbfounded, and their hearts were in their throats. This was because they could see that Lin Sun was injured in the battle. His body was bleeding, which was shocking. In the past, Demon God Lin was invincible and invincible. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the strength of the underworld child was. He was indeed an ancient freak from the Styx Forbidden area. He was extremely powerful. Of course, some people noticed that the underworld child was not feeling well either. His body was trembling slightly, and his face was slightly pale. Suddenly, Lin Sun pressed out a finger. It was as if the power of the spring and autumn period had gathered. It was vast and mighty, and those who went against it would die. Instant of spring and autumn. Many people were shocked. The eyes of top figures like the young golden-winged rock king lit up, and they shone brightly. Poof! If it were any other opponent, they would have been completely crushed by this one finger. But in the end, the underworld child was only injured. He staggered back from the impact of the finger and couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. But at the same time, a bloody mark appeared on Lin Sun's chest. His skin and flesh were lacerated, and his bones could be seen. This was a wound caused by a spear. Both of them were injured, and it was hard to tell who was better. But everyone knew that Lin Sun's performance was amazing enough in comparison, because his cultivation was one realm lower than that of the underworld child, but he could compete with the underworld child in the battle. This was too amazing. Clatter on the underworld child, blazing Taoist light, rose up, and the injuries all over his body were healed in an instant. This scene caused everyone to be flabbergasted. This sort of method of recovery was simply heaven-defying. How could they continue fighting like this? Who could be his opponent? But then, people were surprised to find that with a layer of obscure Taoist light flowing on Lin Sun's body, his injuries were healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone was shocked and speechless. The two of them had fought for hundreds of times and were both injured. But now, they had both recovered. It was incredible. Humph. The test is over. Next, I will tell you what it means to say that there is always someone better. The underworld child's face was cold, and a string of obscure and complicated syllables came out of his lips, like the wind from the depths of the netherworld. Chapter 1272. Rumble. As Ming Child's aura rose, the surrounding world seemed to be reversed, producing a terrible roar that made people cough up blood. 8 ghostly skills. Golden-winged Rock King was shocked. At the same time, many people exclaimed because they recognized that this was a lost technique that had been lost for thousands of years. No one had expected that it would be controlled by Ming Child again at this time. Many people couldn't calm down and sighed. The Dark Child was indeed a prodigy that was accompanied by great luck. He had even cultivated this kind of world-suppressing ultimate art that had been lost for a long time. It was simply too shocking. The so-called 8 ghostly gods were 8 kinds of divine spirits that were integrated with their bodies. When they fought, they seemed to be blessed by the power of the gods, which was extremely terrifying. It was said that when this technique was cultivated to the extreme, it was enough to condense a real netherworld purgatory. With the power of the 8 gods as the guide, it could suppress and kill all enemies. At this moment, many majestic figures appeared in the void behind the underworld child. They were like gods that came from beyond the heavens and were filled with great majesty. Boom! Ming Child waved his fist and burst out infinite visions. Vaguely, the roar of the gods resounded, shocking the world and making ghosts and gods weep. Suddenly, Lin Sun seemed to be in a stormy ocean and would be drowned and killed by the horrible fist energy at any time. Many exclamations sounded in the field. Even Ji Xingyao, Mo Tianhe, and others on Kongsha Mountain changed their faces suddenly. Was this the real combat power of Ming Child? It was so terrible. Tai Chi. In the surging fist energy, Lin Sun held up his hands and punched in the void. His right hand triggered the power of extreme yang, and his left hand reversed to draw the power of extreme yin, which was as dark as ink. His movements were simple and plain, deducing the natural trajectory. Buzz, in an instant, a round of yin and yang tai chi pattern emerged. It was clear and turbid, black and white, like the origin and the end in a cycle, showing infinite perfection. The surging fist energy was so horrible, but it was blocked by the Tai Chi pattern and destroyed inch by inch. A rain of light splashed like a waterfall. Everyone's hearts trembled. Taiji, one of the 99 great ways to heaven. But no one expected that Lin Sun would use this wonderful power to dissolve the 8 ghostly skills. Boom! In the void, when the Tai Chi diagram collapsed, the fist force also disintegrated. The Taiji Great Tao is indeed extraordinary. Unfortunately, it's still not enough. Dark Child's expression was cold. His divine might shook the heavens as he exuded an aura of invincibility. As he spoke, he'd already soared into the sky, while numerous images of gods coiled around him, causing him to seem like a god of the underworld that had descended to the world. Boom! He started to execute the netherworld 8 divine techniques without restraint, and every move revealed the might of collapsing the heavens, destroying the earth, and throwing the world into chaos. Suddenly, Lin Sun fell into a passive position, and his edge was suppressed. Even though the grand Tao of Tai Chi had been attained to the state of Tao truth by him, it was inferior to the might of the Tao laws in the end. At this time, when it was used by Lin Sun, it could only show a passive defense posture and could not fully exert the real power of the supreme way. The battle raged on without end. But everyone knew that Lin Sun would be completely suppressed sooner or later. He was in a precarious situation. He's a longevity 3rd tribulation eminence, after all. It's already astonishing that he can fight with Underworld Child to this point. Even if he's defeated and killed, it won't damage his reputation when he was alive. Someone sighed. Lord Underworld Child is invincible. Who can compete with him? The experts of the underworld all shouted excitedly. How could this be? Ji Xingyao and the rest stiffened, and they looked gloomy. Boom! Lin Sun was blasted back with another strike, and his figure was swaying. That's all. You still dare to call yourself a demon god? That's the biggest joke in the world. Underworld Child's voice was cold, and his movements weren't slow at all. He tore through the air and attacked. Lin Sun was only a longevity 3rd tribulation eminence, but he was able to fight with him to this point. This made him rather angry and humiliated. At this moment, he had the upper hand, so he naturally wouldn't give Lin Sun any chance to catch his breath and recover. "You're boasting shamelessly. I'll let you see my true strength." As soon as Lin Sun said this, everyone was stunned. Countless people were in an uproar. They were all shocked. Could it be that Lin Sun hadn't used his true strength until now? If that was the case, it would be too horrifying. Boom! The aura around Lin Sun suddenly changed. His entire body's essence, chi, and spirit seemed to be boiling, and it shone brightly. Rays of light rained around him like divine halos. Kill! His cold eyes were like lightning as he charged forward. At this moment, the fury of Yazi and the Battle Saint technique were all activated and operated by him. Bang! As soon as they clashed, the originally unstoppable underworld child was shaken by Lin Sun's punch. His body trembled violently, and he flew backward. Everyone was silent. Everyone's eyes widened. This demon god Lin had indeed become different. "This is interesting." Yi Moha was excited. If Lin Sun had been suppressed like that just now, he would have felt a little disappointed. "Do you think I didn't hide my combat strength?" In the void, Underworld Child was furious. He let out a long roar and attacked again. Boom! The two of them clashed fiercely again. Between them, divine power surged and laws interweaved. The tide-like sound and light of Tao transformed into a shocking phenomenon, and they fought fiercely there. There were signs of chaos, ruin, and destruction between heaven and earth. Both of them performed their own techniques, and they displayed peerless combat strength that was far beyond ordinary understanding. It was like a needle against an awl, and it was terrifying beyond compare. This was a peak battle that could shock the world, and it was rare to see in the past. The spectators retreated more than once because the destructive force produced by such a battle was too terrifying. Once one was involved in it, one would absolutely be in danger of death. We all underestimated Lin Sun. His achievements on the peerless path have already reached an unimaginable level. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to be evenly matched with Underworld Child under the circumstances that there's a difference of one realm. Some top figures whispered. For example, the young golden-winged rock king, Yi Moha, Loka, and the others had already acutely judged this, and it caused them to be moved and have different expressions. On Kongzha Mountain, Ji Xingyao and the others' tense emotions eased a little. The formidable combat strength Lin Sun had displayed had surprised them as well. In the battlefield, along with a loud bang, Lin Sun and Underworld Child were separated. Both of them were covered in blood, and they staggered and were injured. Underworld Child's eyes were scarlet, and his face was terrifyingly cold. He hadn't expected that Lin Sun could persist until now. On the other hand, Lin Sun's clothes were in tatters, his long hair hung loosely, and his eyes were dark and cold like an abyss. He'd similarly never imagined that Underworld Child would actually be so difficult to deal with. Piercingly cold, killing intent, and peerless, imposing auras collided between the two of them, and it caused many cultivators to feel suffocated. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone held their breaths in concentration, and they didn't speak a single word as they watched anxiously. Clang! The 9 blood-red bronze spears floated up into appearance, while Underworld Child roared like a thunderclap, and his blood-red long hair flew backwards. Kill! His body was enhanced by the energy of the divine images, and he controlled the 9 blood-red spears to attack once more. His imposing aura had actually become much stronger once more. This fellow really concealed his strength well. The eyes of many people focused, while even some top figures in the surroundings became vigilant in their hearts. The strength Underworld Child revealed had exceeded their estimations time and time again. Clang! At the same time, the broken blade flashed forward. It was jade white like an illusion, light like a feather, and pure to the point it seemed unreal like a bubble, yet it emanated a peerless edge. The broken blade. This was Lin Sun's weapon, and it was known to everyone since a long time ago. It was extremely miraculous and formidable. Earlier, Some people were puzzled why Lin Sun hadn't utilized the broken blade for so long. Now, they finally understood that it wasn't that Lin Sun didn't want to utilize it, but it wasn't the right time. Just like Underworld Child, he'd always been concealing his strength. This was like a game of chess. When both sides were evenly matched, no one would completely expose their trump cards at the first possible moment. In that way, it would be equivalent to being seen through by the enemy. Of course, this was under the circumstances that both sides were evenly matched. If it was any other side that was slightly weaker and dared to hold back, then it would absolutely be no different than courting death. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of weapons colliding resounded in the sky as the broken blade and the 9 blood-red bronze spears collided intensely, and their aura of slaughter covered the heavens and the earth. The situation of the battle was clearly even more formidable than before. Some cultivators with slightly weaker strengths were shaken to the point their ears droned while they saw stars before their eyes, and they almost fell to the ground. Only those top figures were able to maintain their calm at this moment. It wasn't long before a wave of exclamations resounded in the surroundings, because they all saw clearly that under the attack of the broken blade, the 9 bronze spears had been chopped to the point that there were many cracks, and they were wailing incessantly. It was certain that the broken blade was more powerful than the 9 spears in terms of the strength of the treasures. Underworld Child's face was livid, and the killing intent in his heart became more and more violent. Up to this point, he hadn't been able to kill Lin Sun, which had already caused him to lose face. At this time, his 9 spears were still damaged in the battle, which made him even more shocked and furious, and his heart was bleeding. This set of spears was an incomparably rare and precious treasure. It possessed an extremely ancient heritage, and its origin was equally astonishing. Once it was damaged, it was almost impossible to repair it. This broken blade, I'm taking it. In the roar, Underworld Child's blood-red hair danced wildly, and his power was like the sea that swept through the world. But in just a moment, with a loud crack, a blood-stained bronze spear was broken. Everyone present was shocked. Was Lin Sun going to counterattack? Damn you! Underworld Child became more and more furious, and his eyes almost popped out. But in the following battle, spears were broken one after another, which made him furious as if his heart was being cut by a knife. But the broken blade was not damaged at all. In this regard, many people secretly marveled at it, realizing that this treasure of Lin Sun was absolutely an incredible magic weapon. In the end, the Nether Child put away the remaining 5 spears. Even then, these 5 spears were riddled with injuries and had suffered severe damage. Just when everyone thought that Underworld Child was going to be suppressed by Lin Sun, unexpectedly, he took out a blood-red sword. Bang! In the confrontation with the broken blade, this sword, which was only 1 foot long and 2 fingers wide, was as red as blood, showed unparalleled fierce power, and was not damaged. This guy really has a lot of treasures. Many people sighed secretly, but their eyes flashed with envy and jealousy. P.S. Thank you for the monthly tickets of Shoot Out of Grace and Other Children's Shoes. Chapter 1273. Clang, clang, clang. The broken blade and the blood-red sword collided, producing a deafening sound. This caused everyone to be moved. Undoubtedly, the origins of this blood-red divine sword were extremely extraordinary. If one looked carefully, a river of blood could be faintly seen floating within the sword's blade that was 2 fingers wide, and the corpses of fiend gods and fiend gods floated and were buried within the river. It was an extremely horrifying scene. As the sword swept out, the blood river released a terrifying aura that seemed to be able to annihilate all vitality. Mingi! In an instant, Lin Sun recognized the sword. It was the blood-red Mingi that had trapped him for 4 years. It was just a sword, but it contained the aura of the Netherworld River. This was too shocking. Yuan Killer Sword. Someone cried out in surprise. Then there was a sound of gasping in the field. There was an extremely mysterious legend in the ancient Desolation territory. At the beginning of the ancient times, there was an orthodoxy called the Blood Abyss sect. There were 2 swords in this orthodoxy. One was called Yuan Killer, born in the Blood Abyss River. The other was called Avicii, born in the Blood Abyss Purgatory. These two swords were congenital magic weapons and the most precious treasures of the Blood Abyss sect. Only sages could bring out the true power of these two swords. The most terrifying thing was that killing enemies with these two swords was not stained with karma. It was enough to make sages extremely afraid. If the sword in Mingzi's hand was the legendary Yuan killer sword, it would be too shocking. It was enough to make any sage jealous and covetous. It should be the Yuan killer sword, but its power seems to be heavily sealed. Otherwise, its power should be far more than this. Yi Ma's eyes were like lightning, and he was also amazed. In the absolute domain, there is no sage. Fortunately, this sword is sealed. Otherwise, I'm afraid Mingzi would not dare to use it so openly. The eyes of some top figures flickered. The Yuan killer sword is an incomparably fierce sword that can make even sages pale. In the ancient times, this sword has drunk the blood of countless sages and has many legends. Someone whispered, but I'm more curious about what kind of treasure the broken blade in Lin Sun's hand is. It can even fight against the Yuan killer sword. For a moment, everyone had different thoughts. They were all attracted by the treasures used by Lin Sun, an underworld child. Kill. Ming Child's might was disdainful. He controlled the Origin Massacre sword to slaughter the heavens and earth, and he possessed an unmatched and unstoppable sharpness. Everyone was just guessing, but Mingzi was very clear that this sword was Yuan too. However, he had hoped to suppress Lin Sun with this treasure. Unexpectedly, he could only tie with Duan Run. This made him realize how terrifying Broken Blade was. It was precisely because of this that at this moment, he was unprecedentedly serious and went all out, and he didn't dare underestimate his opponent like he did before. But at this time, Lin Sun did not hesitate to use the inheritance of extreme. In an instant, the might of the Broken Blade skyrocketed, as if it had awakened from a deep slumber. The brilliance it revealed caused the entire area to be torn apart like a piece of cloth. On the other hand, many cultivators in the distance felt a piercing pain in their eyes while their hearts and minds were horrified by this sharp light. Clang! In an instant, the Origin Massacre sword was fiercely shattered, and it flew backward with a loud bang. Although the origin of this sword was terrifying, it was a sealed congenital holy weapon after all. Moreover, a battle of this level couldn't be decided by a single treasure. Puff! Caught off guard, Mingzi immediately coughed up blood, and his face suddenly turned pale. Damn it! He roared furiously, and his eyes were scarlet as he charged forward again. There was a commotion in the field. They were all shocked by this unexpected change. Even if he used the Origin Massacre sword, he still couldn't suppress the rhythm of Lin Sun's counterattack. The underworld powerhouses were even more stunned, and they forgot to cheer for Lin Sun. At this moment, Mingzi was obviously completely infuriated, and he had become even stronger and more terrifying than before. His power caused the expressions of some top figures to change. However, Lin Sun didn't intend to hold back at this moment. Along with a clear cry that resounded through the world, when the broken blade swept out, the world returned to silence, and everything seemed to be still at this moment. Silence slash. Puff! A string of scarlet blood splattered, and a bone-deep wound appeared on Mingzi's shoulder. His entire arm was almost cut off. Under the pain, Mingzi's handsome face became distorted. He couldn't believe it. Up until now, there had been more than 1,000 rounds, but the situation was faintly out of his control. Previously, he had seized the initiative and occupied an absolute advantage, steadily suppressing Lin Sun. Even so, it still made him feel humiliated. This was because Lin Sun was one realm weaker than him. But now, Lin Sun, who was originally suppressed by him, not only gradually turned the situation around, but also launched a peerlessly sharp counterattack, causing him to suffer repeated setbacks. How could Mingzi, who was proud and arrogant and looked down on all the heroes in the world, accept this? As for the heroes in the field, they were completely unable to calm down. They finally dared to confirm that Lin Sun, who was in the third tribulation of longevity, had turned danger into safety and launched a counterattack. This seemed very unbelievable, but it had happened right in front of them. They had no choice but to believe it. Kill. Ming Zi went completely mad. His blood-red hair fluttered madly as he activated his Dao and technique to the limit. His entire body was like the nether river that lay across the sky, and he possessed a great dignity that could bury the world. Slash. At this moment, Lin Sun was indeed different. His expression was composed, neither sad nor happy, and he possessed a form of extreme calmness. The broken blade flashed through the sky, flickering as if it was born and extinguished. Life and death slash. Even though Ming Zi dodged in time, a bloody wound was still cut open on his back, and fresh blood sprayed out like a waterfall. His face became even paler, and he let out a roar like a wild beast. All of this had exceeded his expectations, and he was unable to believe it. At this moment, everyone present was completely stirred, and they were all shocked by the strength that Lin Sun revealed. "I'll kill you." Amidst his roar that shook the heavens and the earth, Ming Zi's aura was violent, and it swept through the world as he launched a slaughter. He was too furious. Lin Sun remained calm and composed. With a command in his heart, an indescribably obscure aura suffused out from the broken blade. Swoosh! The broken blade flashed lightly as it slashed down. It seemed to be ordinary, yet it gave others a feeling of impermanence. Its traces were unknown, and its profundities were unknown. It was like the mechanism of the Grand Tao, and it was utterly impossible to lock onto. Many cultivators felt uncomfortable to the point they almost coughed up blood, because this slash was simply like a mystery, and it was impeccable. Some top figures had heavy expressions as well, and they were astounded and filled with disbelief. On the other hand, when this slash descended, the aura of lethal danger instantly arose in Ming Zi's heart, and it caused his scalp to almost explode. This feeling was like he couldn't escape it or avoid it. Pooh! In the next instant, a large head flew up, dripping with blood. At this moment, the surroundings suddenly fell into a strange, deathly silence. Everyone opened their eyes wide as they watched all of this in a dumbstruck manner. They weren't able to catch sight of this slash, yet it had slashed off Ming Zi's head. A shapeless wave of shock started to spread towards the hearts and minds of everyone. The scene seemed as if it had frozen at this moment. The Nether Child was an ancient freak that had slumbered in the region of extinction for countless years. During these years that he'd emerged into the world, he'd led his group of subordinates to go on expeditions, causing the name of the Nether Earth to be known by everyone. Such a ruthless person who possessed great luck and extraordinary combat strength had been defeated today, and even his head had been chopped off. Who could have imagined it? The most unbelievable thing was that his opponent, Lin Sun, was a realm lower than him in cultivation. At this moment, even the young golden-winged Rock King, Yema, Loka, and the other top figures fell into silence, and their hearts surged with emotions. They were wondering if they could block Lin Sun's slash if it were them. Plop! The head fell to the ground, and the dust splashed up. This muffled sound was especially ear-piercing in this extremely silent atmosphere. Many people's hearts even beat fiercely. But unexpectedly, Lin Sun, the victor at this moment, didn't relax at all, and his expression became even more solemn. Right at this moment, a shrill and extremely furious roar resounded in the surroundings. Then, under the horrified gaze of the crowd, the headless body of Ming Zi suddenly swelled up, and his clothes suddenly burst apart, turning into a strange beast body. This was a blood mosquito, several meters in size. Its body was as red as blood, as if it was made of divine gold, emitting a strange chill. Its eyes were like blood-colored lanterns, cold and frightening. There were 8 pairs of wings on its back, and each pair of wings was branded with dense and obscure underworld characters, making it ferocious and terrible. Its aura was so fierce that it made people tremble. Standing in the void, it was like an evil god descending to the world, with monstrous momentum. 8-winged blood mosquito. Someone cried out involuntarily. According to the legend, it's the most terrible omen in the underworld. People were in an uproar and restless. Eight-winged blood mosquito, a peerless omen born in the sticks, was a kind of inborn mutant and had incredible fierce combat power. Six-winged blood mosquito was not rare in the Styx forbidden area, but this one was the only one with 8 wings. No one thought that the real body of Ming Zi would be an 8-winged blood mosquito. This was too unbelievable, and it made people's hearts palpitate. No one thought that after Ming Zi's head was cut off, not only did he not die, but his real body appeared, and his aura became even more terrifying. Roar! The 8-winged blood mosquito let out a roar, and its murderous intent surged through the world. It rose into the air and pounced at Lin Sun. Its speed was so fast that it seemed like it was teleporting. Slash! Lin Sun did not let his guard down. The broken blade slashed down, swift and decisive. Bang! Unexpectedly, the broken blade that had injured Ming Zi was blocked by the 8-winged blood mosquito. Its body emitted a strange bloody light that destroyed the power of this slash. This shocked everyone. It was worthy of being the legendary omen. At this moment, the 8-winged blood mosquito rushed forward with a ferocious might, as if nothing could stop it. Its 8 pairs of blood-colored wings flapped, and beams of light formed from underworld characters poured down. Also, its roar had a strange, penetrating power. Even though it was far away, many people's eardrums were torn and blood flowed out. Some powerhouses were so shaken that they almost fainted. Too strong. Everyone finally dared to confirm that Ming Zi's real trump card was his real body. This was something that no one had thought of before. Chapter 1274. Tut! Lin Sun also uttered a light rebuke. This was the profound meaning of Pu Lao's roar. The sound wave spread like a substantial ripple and collided with the hissing of the 8-winged blood mosquito. There was a big explosion between the two, and the world was rumbling. Clang! At the same time, Lin Sun jumped up like a dragon flying in the sky, and the broken sword rushed at the mosquito with invincible power. The blazing and peerless sharpness made the world pale. The 8-winged blood mosquito roared, and its slender lips were like sharp awls. A light peck was enough to break all defenses. This was its innate ability. Anyone who was bitten by it would instantly be sucked dry of their vitality and turned into a dried corpse. Boom! The broken sword was blocked again and was destroyed by the 8 pairs of bloody wings. The sharp mouth of the 8-winged blood mosquito collided with Lin Sun's fist. Sparks splashed everywhere. Lin Sun felt pain in his palm and fingers, and his skin was almost pierced. Whoosh! A pair of cyan light beams flashed out of the bloody eyes of the 8-winged blood mosquito, like crisscrossing heavenly sabers. It became fiercer and fiercer, and its attack was so powerful that Lin Sun felt extremely strenuous and passive. Originally, his cultivation was lower than that of the 8-winged blood mosquito. Now he encountered such a peerless monster, which suddenly increased the pressure. Lin Sun had killed many 6-winged blood mosquitoes in the periphery of the forbidden land of Styx, but he never expected that the 8-winged blood mosquito, transformed by the child of hell, could be so fierce. Puff! Just a moment later, Lin Sun was hit by a bloody light beam of hell. A bloody hole was pierced through his arm, and his flesh was corroded. The attack of the 8-winged blood mosquito became more and more fierce. When it flapped its 8 pairs of wings, it was extremely fast, as if it was teleporting. Moreover, each pair of wings was branded with dense bloody hell characters, which could release bloody light beams with amazing killing power. Its eyes and sharp beak also had their own innate divine abilities. It could be said that the combat power of this monster was strong enough to frighten ghosts and gods. Boom! Without any hesitation, Lin Sun ran the devouring star way. At this moment, everyone's heart shuddered and they felt an inexplicable chill. When he looked at Lin Sun again, he found that Lin Sun's figure was like an abyss, vast and boundless. The void where he stood seemed to be sinking and about to be engulfed. That invisible power caused everyone's expression to change. What kind of power is this? Someone was shocked. Is it the devouring Great Tao? No wonder people say that he's the same as Yin Qingbai. They both control a similar mystical Tao. There are also people who were moved. When it comes to hiding, even Mingzi is not as good as Lin Sun. He didn't use his trump card until now. Some top figures exclaimed in admiration. For a moment, the change of Lin Sun's aura attracted the attention of all the people present. In particular, some overmatches who had witnessed Yun Qingbai's battle with their own eyes began to compare him with Lin in their hearts. Boom! The eight-winged blood mosquito attacked again, its wings flapping at an incredible speed. Rays of blood-colored light swept across the sky, interweaving into a blood-colored ancient scripture, suppressing down. A weird green glow appeared in his eyes and was released. With a shout from Lin Sun, a big abyss emerged, in which countless stars were annihilated. In the terrible collision sound, the bloody ancient scripture was forcibly blocked. The two collided with each other, causing violent friction, which completely disrupted the nearby void. In Lin Sun's sea of consciousness, there was a sudden shock. Rays of green light emerged and attacked his three spiritual incarnations. Undoubtedly, this was the ultimate attack of the eight-winged blood mosquito. First, he used the bloody ancient scripture to suppress the enemy, and then launched a surprise attack on the soul. If it were another overmatch, even if he could block one of the attacks, he would be caught off guard by the other attack. Unfortunately, these attacks were ineffective against Lin Sun. Lin Sun's three spiritual incarnations had already been tempered to the extreme. With Little Silver, who had evolved into a spirit-eating insect king, he was not afraid of any soul attack at all. Chi-Chi. In an instant, the three spiritual incarnations ran the great infernal magic. Little Silver also attacked at the same time, wiping out all the green light. The eight-winged blood mosquito screamed and suffered from the counterattack. Boom! At the same time, the boundless abyss released infinite power, crushing the bloody ancient scripture inch by inch and swallowing it up. Chop! Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Sun used the broken sword to the extreme and chopped down. Puff! Blood splashed, and the eight-winged blood mosquito's arms were cut off. If it hadn't dodged extremely fast, it would have been cut in half. Demon God Lin. Someone shouted, his blood boiling. This series of actions happened in an instant. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and extremely tense. Lin Sun, on the other hand, launched another counterattack and defeated the eight-winged blood mosquito in one fell swoop. Some top figures had to admit that the combat power Lin Sun showed at this time had completely exceeded their expectations. In fact, from the beginning of the battle to the present, Lin Sun could turn the situation around every time, which was very shocking in itself. Those overmatches of the underworld were all dumbfounded, and their faces changed constantly. On Kongsha Mountain, Ji Xingyao and others were in a trance. Too many dangerous things happened in this battle, which made their emotions fluctuate. Boom! In the void, Lin Sun used the Devouring Star Doctrine to develop his own technique, and his power was completely different from before as he launched a strong counterattack. He moved horizontally like a great abyss, and wherever he passed, wind and clouds were swept away, and all attacks were annihilated. In fact, after suffering a heavy setback, the combat power of the eight-winged blood mosquito still couldn't be underestimated, but at this time, it was completely suppressed by Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun completely used his trump card. In the past, Lin Sun wouldn't easily use the Devouring Star Doctrine unless it was a critical moment. During the 4 years that he was trapped under the sticks, Lin Sun had already attained the level of Tao rule in this shocking power of the Great Way. How could its power be ordinary? Not to mention that the eight-winged blood mosquito was supported by the power of the fury of Yazi and the battle saint technique. Coupled with the extreme inheritance of the broken sword, it was simply invincible and unstoppable. However, it could also be seen from this that the eight-winged blood mosquito was extremely powerful, and was able to force Lin Sun to use his trump card. This wasn't something that just anyone could do. Roar! The 8-winged blood mosquito went crazy and activated the Yuan killer sword, but was bound by Lin Sun's Baxiao prohibition, and the power of the abyss swallowed the legendary and peerless sword. Everyone was shaken. It could be seen that Lin Sun had an absolute advantage, and the defeat of the 8-winged blood mosquito was destined to happen sooner or later. But an unexpected scene happened. At this time, the 8-winged blood mosquito seemed to be aware of the danger and rushed to Lin Sun with a desperate posture. Boom! In the terrible collision, although the 8-winged blood mosquito was seriously injured, its 8 pairs of bloody wings successfully broke Lin Sun's attack and suddenly surrounded Lin Sun in its wings. Crack! Beams of bloody light burst out, piercing holes in Lin Sun's body, and blood dyed the sky red. Many people cried out involuntarily. Ji Xingyao and others felt their hearts in their throats. They clenched their fists and almost suffocated. This desperate fight was very likely to make Lin Sun and the 8-winged blood mosquito die together. It's over. Both Lin Sun and Mingzi are going to die. Some people were horrified. What? But soon, people noticed that something was wrong. Although Lin Sun was trapped and wounded, he soon stabilized himself. Moreover, there was a layer of strange Taoist power that imprisoned the 8 pairs of bloody wings, making them unable to move. It was the abyss. How dare Lin Sun? He lured the enemy deep into the abyss and deliberately injured himself to kill the 8-winged blood mosquito. Someone exclaimed. This was not a situation of mutual destruction, but Lin Sun's deliberate action. Boom! When people came to their senses, Lin Sun had completely broken out. The power of star obliteration devouring Wei ran to the extreme, and the abyss rotated and rumbled. In the blink of an eye, the 8 pairs of wings were crushed and broken, and a rain of blood fell like a waterfall. Ah! The 8-winged blood mosquito screamed and went completely crazy. It desperately tried to break out of the encirclement. It also realized that it had been fooled. Lin Sun couldn't tolerate it escaping, so he launched a full-scale killing. This was an extremely horrifying and bloody battle, and it caused everyone to shudder with fear and feel their entire bodies go cold. No one had expected that this peerless peak duel would last to such a dangerous and bloody point. Everyone could see that it had come to the last moment. Both Lin Sun and the 8-winged blood mosquito, transformed by Ming Child, were injured and consumed a lot. But at the same time, the winner was about to be decided. Boom! Suddenly, as if unwilling to be killed by Lin Sun, a dazzling green light burst out from the sharp mouth of the 8-winged blood mosquito. It was an eyeball. It was the size of a child's fist, showing a strange dark green color. The light it emitted was full of indescribable death chi. Another spirit eye. Someone screamed. This was another great treasure. It was said that anyone who was stared at by this, I would instantly fall into the netherworld purgatory and die. How cruel! Someone was shocked. Ming Child had endured until the last moment before using this big killing weapon, which could be called a fatal blow. Even Lin Sun was caught off guard. However, he reacted very quickly and was about to use a secret method to resolve this blow. Who would have thought that at this moment, a dim yellow oil lamp would automatically appear in front of him? The lamp was dim and mottled, but it seemed to have incredible power. It ignited the nether spirit eye in an instant and burned it. Puff! The 8-winged blood mosquito coughed up blood and roared furiously. No blame for Great Way Lamp. No wonder you could survive in Styx River. It turns out that this treasure has fallen into your hands. His voice was full of resentment and unwillingness. Obviously, he recognized this treasure. Boom! However, how could Lin Sun talk nonsense with him? He seized the opportunity and used his killing move without hesitation. The light around him surged, and the abyss roared. Half of the 8-winged blood mosquito's body was obliterated and crushed. As it let out an incredibly shrill scream of pain, it was instantly sent flying. Its broken body swiftly turned back into the appearance of a dark child once more. However, Before it could struggle, the bright and wholly broken blade swept out and completely cut off its body. Its flesh and blood were sprinkled in the void like a waterfall. The audience was completely silent, and even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone's pupils dilated, and they were shocked into silence.